Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My dad spent 15 years tending to the tree in our backyard. I just cut it down, and I don't think it was a tree. I don't know where else to turn. I can't talk to my mom about this. She's already a wreck. I can't talk to my dad because, well, he's the reason I'm writing this. I did something, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving him. But now the house is filled with a silence that is so much worse than the screaming I wish I could hear. And I see the look in my father's eyes, and I know I've made a terrible, terrible mistake. I need help. I need someone to tell I need to do. We live in a nice house. The kind of place people move to when they want a family. A big yard, a picket fence, flower beds my mom fusses over. It was a normal, happy place to grow up until the tree. It all started about 15 years ago. I was 10. My dad came home from work one day absolutely buzzing with energy I'd rarely seen. He was a quiet man, a decent man, worked a steady job in logistics, and his passions were small and manageable. He loved gardening. It was his escape. On this day, he was holding a small, wrinkled paper bag. "Look at this," he said, his eyes shining as he showed me a single gnarled black seed. It was the size of a pigeon's egg, strangely heavy and covered in faint spiral patterns. Got it from a street vendor downtown. An old fella. Said it was special. Said it would grow into a great tree, a king in our yard. Said it would cast its shadow over the whole house and protect us. I was 10. I thought it was cool. My dad was a sane, rational man, but he always got a bit poetic when he talked about his garden. I just figured he was exaggerating to make his only kid excited. We planted it together in the center of the backyard. It was a good memory. One of the last purely good ones, I think. The tree grew, and it grew fast. Faster than any tree has a right to grow. Within a couple of years, it was already taller than me. My dad was ecstatic. He tended to it like it was some kind of deity. He built a small, neat wooden fence around its base, not to keep animals out, but it seemed to designate its space as sacred. No one else was allowed to water it. No one else was allowed to prune it. Not that it ever seemed to need it. It was his. For years, my mom and I just accepted it. It was Dad's hobby, his thing. When he was out in the yard, kneeling by the tree, we knew that was his time. We didn't interfere. We didn't think much of it. But the tree kept growing. And as it grew, my dad started to change. Subtly at first. He'd spend more and more time out there. He'd come in for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and a distant, peaceful look on his face. He started talking about the tree not as a plant, but as a presence. "The tree is well today," he'd say. "It enjoyed the rain." We'd just smile and nod. By the time I was in my early 20s, the tree was a monster. It was a species none of us recognized. Its bark was a smooth, dark gray, almost black, and its leaves were a deep, waxy green that seemed to drink the sunlight. It towered over our two-story house, casting a vast, profound shadow over the entire backyard for most of the day. And that's when we really started to notice the wrongness. The first sign was the other plants. My mom's prize-winning roses, the vegetable patch, the cheerful little flowers she planted every spring. And anything that fell under the tree's shadow for more than a few hours a day would wither and die. The soil beneath it became barren, gray, and hard as rock. Then the animals. Birds stopped nesting in our yard. The squirrels that used to chase each other across the lawn vanished. Even our family dog, a golden retriever, would refuse to go into the backyard. He'd stand at the back door, whining, his tail tucked between his legs, refusing to set a single paw in the shadow. But the worst change was in my father. His obsession became his entire existence. He quit his job. He said he needed to be home to attend to the tree. He'd spend all day, from sunrise to sunset, sitting on a small bench he built directly under its densest branches. He just sat there. Sometimes we'd see him from the kitchen window, his head tilted, as if he were listening to something. Sometimes his lips would move, and we knew with a certainty that made us sick that he was talking to it. My mom and I tried to reach him. We pleaded. We begged. "Honey, please," my mom would say, her voice breaking. "Come inside. Eat something. You look so thin." He'd just shake his head, a slow, placid smile on his face. "I'm not hungry. The shadow is enough. It's so peaceful here. It comforts me. It can comfort you, too, if you just come and sit with me." We never did. There was something about that shadow. It wasn't just a lack of light. It felt cold. It felt heavy. It felt hungry. Standing at the edge of it felt like standing at the shore of a deep, dark ocean. You knew you shouldn't step in. The last weeks were the breaking point. He stopped coming inside at all, except to sleep in his chair in the living room for a few fitful hours. He was wasting away. His skin was pale and waxy. His eyes were sunken, but they held a serene, vacant glow that terrified me more than any anger could have. He was being consumed. The tree was eating him alive, and he was letting it. I decided I had to do something. I had to save him. The tree had to go. I waited until night. I watched through the window until he finally, reluctantly, came inside and slumped into his armchair, falling into his usual restless sleep. The house was silent. My mom was asleep upstairs. This was my chance. I grabbed the heavy wood-splitting axe from the garage. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I stepped out the back door. The yard was bathed in the pale, ethereal light of full moon, but the ground beneath the tree was a pit of absolute blackness. I stepped into the shadow. The cold was immediate, shocking. It wasn't a natural cold. It was a deep, draining cold that seemed to pull the warmth directly from my bones. I walked to the base of the tree. Its smooth, black bark felt strangely slick to the touch, almost like skin. I raised the axe. As the metal head touched the bark, I heard it, a whisper, right beside my ear, a voice that was both male and female, old and young. It was a rustle of leaves and a sigh of wind, and a voice, all at once. "Don't." I stumbled back, my heart seizing in my chest. I looked around wildly. The yard was empty. I had to have imagined it. It was the wind. It was my own fear talking back to me. It had to be. I steeled myself, spat on my hands, and swung the axe with all my might. Whack. The sound was dull, wet, not the sharp crack of axe on what I was expecting. It felt like hitting a side of beef. The axe bit deep into the trunk. I wrenched it free, and a dark liquid, black in the moonlight, began to ooze from the gash. I ignored it. I swung again, and again, and again. I fell into a frantic, desperate rhythm, sweat pouring down my face, my muscles screaming. The wet, fleshy thud of the axe, the splatter of the dark sap, the deep, draining cold of the shadow. It was a nightmare. With every swing, the ooze from the gash flowed more freely. The coppery, metallic smell of it filled the air. It was a smell I knew, a smell that had no business being here. It was a smell of blood. I touched the sticky liquid with my fingers, brought them to my nose. It was blood. Thick, dark, real blood. Panic, stark and absolute, seized me. I wanted to run. I wanted to drop the axe and flee and never look back. But then I thought of my father, of his vacant, smiling face, of him wasting away on his bench. I couldn't stop. I had to finish it. I screamed a raw, wordless sound of rage and fear, and I put everything I had into the last few swings. The gash widened, the tree groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that seemed to shake the very ground. And then, with a final, tearing shriek of splintering matter, it fell. It crashed into the yard with a ground-shaking boom, its great branches shattering my mom's empty flower pots. Silence. The shadow was gone. I was panting, leaning on the axe, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My eyes were drawn to the stump, to the place where I had cut it. I pulled the small flashlight from my back pocket and aimed the beam at the wound. The inside of the tree wasn't wood. It was a chaotic, fibrous mass of what looked like dark red muscle and pale, glistening sinew, all woven around a central, horrifying core. Where I had cut the tree in half, I had also cut it in half. Embedded in the center of the trunk, integrated into its very being, was the torso of a human being. I could see the curve of the rib cage, the shape of the spine, the pale, rubbery look of preserved flesh. I had cut it clean through. The dark blood was still pouring from it, soaking into the ground. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind simply stopped. What was this? Who was this? Was this what my father had been talking to? Burn it. The voice came from behind me. It was quiet, raspy, and broken. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. My father was standing at the edge of the patio. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the fallen tree, at the mangled, bleeding stump, and the expression on his face. It was the most profound, gut-wrenching sadness I have ever witnessed. The vacant serenity was gone, replaced by a grief so deep it looked like it had cracked his very soul. "Dad," I whispered. "We have to burn it," he repeated, his voice hollow. "All of it. Now." We worked together in a grim, silent ritual. We hacked the branches and the great trunk into manageable pieces. We dragged them into a pile in the center of the yard. My father moved like an old man, his newfound clarity costing him all his strength. He never once looked at the horrifying thing at the heart of the trunk. We doused the pile in gasoline, and my father threw the match. The fire went up a roar, a greasy, black smoke that smelled of burning meat and something else, something acrid and deeply wrong. We stood there for hours, watching it burn, until the great tree that had dominated our lives was nothing but a pile of glowing embers and a scorched black circle on the lawn. I thought I had saved him. I thought I had cut out the cancer that was killing him. But I was wrong. It's been a week. The tree is gone. The shadow is gone. My father, he's inside. He eats what my mom puts in front of him. He sleeps in his own bed. He's physically present, but he's not here. The obsession is gone, but the peace, twisted as it was, is gone, too. It's been replaced by a constant, humming anxiety. He paces the house. He stares out the window at the empty space in the yard. He jumps at every unexpected sound. He doesn't speak, not a single word since that night. He just looks at me sometimes with those haunted, broken eyes, and I feel like I'm a monster. I destroyed the thing that was consuming him, and in doing so, I seem to have destroyed him, too. I traded a smiling zombie for a silent, terrified ghost. What was that thing? What did I do? And how do I fix my dad? Is there any way to bring him back from whatever edge I've pushed him over? Please, if anyone has any idea what happened here, tell me. The silence in this house is getting louder every day. Story 2. I get paid to answer phone calls all day, but I am only allowed to listen. We've all heard of Odd Job before. Quirky social media gigs. Requests from strangers on the internet. Sometimes legit, mostly illegal. I want to warn you about my latest venture. The premise is simple, but confusing. You're paid to answer calls, but you can only listen. If you talk back, if you say anything at all, you're done. Curious? So was I. But before I jump in, I want to set the scene for you. There's a lot of ground to cover, but I promise it'll be worth the wait. Let's start with the call center. There's a certain uneasiness in the building. It's not the lights or the computers or the AC rumbling to the white panel ceiling. It's deeper than that, a quiet, unnerving buzz. The longer you are here, the easier it gets, but the feeling never quite goes away. It just gets buried, deeper and deeper into that steel case you call your mind. You'd be surprised how many people there are in this office. It's quiet, but it isn't silent, never silent. If you sit still long enough, if you really listen, you can hear them. The voices, the steady rhythm of desperation. Cries, pleas, whispers, screams. They're not loud. Not loud enough to disturb anyone. Just soft enough to make your skin crawl, like a bad feeling you can't place. They're not coming from the workers. They're pouring out of phones. The never-ending sea of desperate callers, ringing in day after day. Every call is different. Every voice is different. But the words, the stories, always the same. Please, they say, I don't know where I am. Something is outside the door. I need help. But no one responds. No one ever does. 2 cubes down, Martha, that's what I call her, is filling out a crossword. She taps her acrylic nails against her desk like she's typing away at an invisible keyboard. Then there is Debbie, again not her name, but she seems like a Debbie. She is tall, brunette, and eating the same cheap parfait she brings in every day. I think it's strawberry flavored. Nobody talks here. Not out loud. Not unless they still want to work here. We don't wear name tags. We don't introduce ourselves. We don't even wear our own faces. Everyone's assigned a mask. Not the sanitary kind. Not the Halloween kind either. They're corporate. Sleek. Smooth. Almost artistic. I would describe it as a masquerade-style mask, without the usual glitter and tassels. They start just below the forehead and stop just above the mouth. They say it's part of the experiment. What experiment? Nobody really knows. That's kind of the whole point. We're not here to understand. We're here to follow instructions. Answer the call. Don't say anything. Let them speak. Let them scream. Let them beg. Just sit there with the phone pressed to your ear and listen until the line goes dead. That's it. That's the job. It seems cheap, gimmicky almost, like we're a part of the latest reality TV series where cameramen are hiding in bushes with ulterior motives. I thought the same at first. But if there is something that doesn't lie, it's money, and lots of it. That's why I'm here. I'm Ariana, 19 years old, college dropout, a few semesters in, then I quit. Way too much debt, too little hope. Credit cards stacked like a tower ready to fall. I spent weeks scouring every corner of the internet for something. Anything that could get me back on my feet, even if just for a while. That's when Mabel introduced me to her profession. Mabel was unique. Always dressed sharp. Nice car, good career. Chanel bag casually tossed over her shoulder. A very independent woman. She lived in the city, paid her own bills, and did whatever the hell she wanted to. She was fun, serious, and motivating all at once. We have been friends for a while now, but she always kept me at arm's length. Sure, we would go out and have a nice time together, bond over past relationships and mutual interests. But there was something mysterious about her. She never really talked about her work. I assumed it was drugs or some kind of shady side hustle. It wasn't like her to keep secrets. But when she saw how down on my luck I was, she took pity, handed me a business card, and then, just as quickly, told me she never gave me that card. If anyone asks you, I didn't give you that card. You don't know Mabel and Mabel don't know you, she said sharply. Apparently, that was against the company's rules. Nobody can know anyone else who works there. I was confused, but curious. I called the number. A voice answered. Cold, mysterious. They asked me 2 questions. Do you break under pressure? Do you know anyone else who works here? I said no and no. That was it. No background check, no references. Didn't even ask to see the resume I carefully prepared for the occasion. They gave me an address and a time. Simple as that. The onboarding was just as strange as everything else. You'd think I was signing up for some military program or a secret government project. Everyone was tight-lipped. No smiling. No small talk. The rules were simple and unsettling. 1. Arrive at the building exactly when your shift starts. Not a minute early, not a minute late. 2. 3. Keep your mask on the entire time. No exceptions. 4. 5. Don't identify yourself. Don't try to identify anyone else. 6. 7. Do not respond or speak to the caller on the other end of the line. 8. It felt odd to say the least, but I kept telling myself it was just one big experiment. They're paying for data, not for us to help anyone. We're not really answering calls. With a product being fed to someone or something higher up the chain. That is what the assessors say at least. Assessors are basically glorified managers. People with a flashy degree and people skills that tell you the voices aren't real. That the people on the other end aren't people at all. They're artificial, synthetic, part of the test, and nothing more. Simulations, they say. You're not hurting anyone. It's about resilience, exposure therapy, mental strength. Sure, buddy. I don't know what they are. I refuse to believe they are people. It wouldn't make sense. But they don't act like simulations either. They don't sound fake. They sob. They stutter. They beg for their kids. They talk about the thing outside the closet, or the eyes on the bed, or monster outside their window. You sit there. You listen. You grip your pen tighter and tighter until the call drops out, or the screaming stops, or there's that awful, sudden silence like something just grabbed the person out of existence. Then you breathe. You clear your throat, and the phone rings again. You pick up. I've been here 8 months now. Not long, but long enough to know the rhythm. This job isn't about smarts or motivation. It's about routine, muscle memory. You have to build your own little rhythm. Listening to terror all day eats at you, breaks you down slowly. I've seen it happen. New masks come in wide-eyed and curious, and by month 2 they're breaking rules or just gone. My routine is pretty straightforward at this point. I get in at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Same elevator, same gray carpet, same cubicle by the fire exit. I don't speak to anyone. It's safer that way. Chatter is dangerous for me and for whoever's already picking up calls. At 7 a.m., my phone activates. The light goes on. Not a ring, never a ring. Just a light. Blue means wait. Red means answer. And when it's red, you answer. You don't greet them. You don't ask questions. You just listen. And what you hear, well, they're always running, always hiding, always being chased by something they can't quite describe. A little boy whispering, saying something is scratching at his door. His mom won't wake up. A woman panting, saying she's in the stairwell. Something is coming up behind her fast, and the police aren't answering her calls anymore. A man with a crushed voice, locked in a closet. He mutters that he hears footsteps pacing back and forth, right outside, stopping every time he breathes. Different voices, same panic. Some of them say they're in a hallway, or a small bedroom, or under a sink. Sometimes they describe this building, the call center. They'll mention glass double doors, or the color of the carpet, or the smell of coffee from a nearby break room. Sometimes they describe the workers. You have a mask, they'll say. Black gloves, I know you. You can help me. Then they scream. We're not supposed to react. Not even a twitch. I've gotten pretty good at it. Neutral face, steady hands. A woman once asked me to sing to her while something chewed its way through a front door. I didn't, but I wanted to. It sticks to you, even after the call ends. Especially then. We all handle it differently. Food, puzzles, fidgeting. Anything to let out the tension. To cope, I sketch what they describe. Not out of interest or enjoyment, just release. Macabre, maybe, but it makes the images leave my head a little faster. Dark figures, tall shadows, doorways broken and bloody, a lot of staircases. And then, just when I start to forget, the light turns red again. The first few days were the hardest, but then my first check came in. After just 1 month on the job, I paid off my student loans. That crushing weight finally lifted. I felt like I could breathe again. A month later, I bought my first car, used but reliable. Then I paid off my credit card debt. For the first time in years, the numbers in my bank account weren't a burden I needed to figure out. Now, I live in a multi-bedroom loft right in the city. The kind of place with exposed brick walls and big windows that let in way too much sunlight. I'm driving the car I used to drool over in magazines. The one I thought I'd never afford. The money washes away the guilt at this point. Synthetic manufactured guilt. Like a fresh coat of paint covering the grime beneath. Except the grime is just as processed as the paint at this point. Maybe that was the point all along. Just an expensive, extravagant experiment. A cold, corporate bet that people will do almost anything for the right amount of cash. even if it means listening to fake snuff calls for hours on end. That's what I told myself. The calls were just noise, background static to the paycheck. Until I heard something I never expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was halfway through my shift, eyes drifting between the crossword puzzle I'd started yesterday and the dull glow of my screen. I was a little hungover, my head still fuzzy from last night's bad decisions. Maybe that's why I was so caught off guard. Maybe that is why I made this horrible mistake. The phone turned red. I picked up instinctively, my eyes still fixed on the crossword puzzle. Hello? Is anyone there? I need help. The voice was faint but unmistakable. It was her, Mabel. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Thought maybe I'd picked up my personal phone by mistake. My heart started to hammer. Mabel, I whispered before I could stop myself. The room was quiet. Not just the usual quiet of the call center, but something heavier, thicker, like the room was holding its breath. I felt eyes on me, dozens of masked faces turned in my direction, watching, waiting. I felt my face go red as hot embarrassment washed over me. I ducked my head below my cubicle wall. Phone still pressed to my ear. Shit, I was done. Then Mabel spoke again. Wait, Ariana. I wanted to hang up, but something stopped me. I just didn't understand. Why was Mabel on the line? I've heard hundreds of simulated voices plead and beg for a response. I never imagined it could sound like someone you know. I was already reaching to hang up, but she said something strange. Something unexpected. Oh no. No, she stammered, voice trembling with confusion. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. This wasn't the Mabel I knew. Then she started laughing. Not the light, friendly laugh I remembered. A manic, broken laugh. It didn't stop. I slammed the phone down. I spun around, heart racing, and there she was, a member of HR, standing just at the edge of my cubicle. Black mask, notepad in hand, expression unreadable. She motioned for me to follow. No words, just a slow, deliberate walk toward her office. I sat down in the stiff plastic chair across from her desk, my mind still reeling. The call played on a loop in my head. The voice, the laugh, the way it sounded exactly like Mabel. I couldn't stop shaking. You broke the rules. Yes? She asked flatly, scribbling in her notepad without looking up. Yes, but... You understand this means you are terminated from the call center, correct? She cut me off with such finality, like it was scripted, like she was reciting lines from a procedure manual. I recognized her. I said, the voice. I thought I picked up my own phone by accident. I thought maybe it wasn't even. That made her pause. She looked up for the first time. Her eyes were sharp behind the mask, almost disappointed. Or was it fear? You thought what? It sounded like someone I knew, a friend of mine. She didn't write anything down now, just stared at me. When you first applied to this job, you answered 2 questions. Do you remember them? I hesitated. My stomach turned. They asked if I was good under pressure, and if I knew anyone who worked here. And how did you answer? No. I said no to both. She stared a moment longer, then slowly ripped a sheet of paper from her pad and slid it across the desk. You are hereby terminated from this experiment. You can collect your final check at the location printed on this slip. You've also been granted a severance equivalent to 1 month's salary. I blinked at her. Wait, that's all. She didn't respond, just went back to typing, like I wasn't there anymore. No explanation, no follow-up about the call, no mention of what I heard, just a polite termination and a severance bonus. I grabbed the paper without reading it and stormed out, past the rows of silent, masked employees, past the flickering overhead lights, and out into the daylight. I was halfway in my car when I realized I hadn't even removed my mask. I didn't look back. I felt everything over the next few days. Sadness, anger, confusion. Like my body kept going through the motions, but my mind was stuck on a loop. That voice on the other end of the call. The thing that sounded like Mabel. I didn't know what I was supposed to believe anymore. On the second day, I caved and called her, straight to voicemail. That was weird. We were supposed to hang out next weekend. Maybe grab drinks and vent about the call center. Mabel never ghosted me. Not even when she was sick or pissed or going through it. Something was off. By the third day, I decided I needed to get out of the house. Clear my head. The address they gave me for my severance package wasn't far, so I drove out. It led me to a hotel. One of those upscale downtown places with giant flower arrangements and staff that wore gloves. I didn't even see a front desk, just a wall of private mailboxes near the back. The code they gave me worked. The lock clicked open, and inside was a check, neatly folded, like it had just been printed. I left and crossed the street to the parking garage where I'd left my car. As I reached the elevator, I paused. There was someone standing on the sidewalk a little ways down, right outside the garage entrance. Big blonde hair, fur coat, tall boots. Mabel? I stepped forward without thinking. Just a few feet, enough to get a better look. And that's when I saw it wasn't her. Not really. The thing looked like Mabel, as she'd been made from melting wax. Too tall, limping slightly. Her skin hung off her face in folds, sagging like old leather. Her mouth was slack. Her eyes, God, her eyes, two hollow pits ringed with tiny, sharp teeth. Her hands were worse. Loose skin, twisted fingers bent at angles that didn't make sense. And yet people kept walking past her like she wasn't there. They moved around her, avoided bumping into her, like she had a presence. She took up space, but no one looked. Not directly. They didn't see her. Not really. If they did, they would have been as terrified as I was. The elevator behind me dinged, and the doors opened. I ran inside, slammed the closed door button with shaking fingers. As the doors slid shut, I heard footsteps on the concrete. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Too close. I didn't look. I didn't want to see her again. The elevator dropped me off a few floors up. I got in my car and drove. Fast. Too fast. Every red light felt like a trap. Every time I glanced out my window, I expected to see her there on the sidewalk, moving along in slow, rhythmic motion, like a snail wearing human skin. I called a few friends on the way home, just to hear voices. I didn't tell them what I saw. Didn't want to sound insane, but I felt insane. All those desperate calls I've been ignoring, month after month of people screaming and crying and begging. And now it's like the floodgates have opened. Everything's pouring in at once. Maybe I was having a breakdown. That's what I kept telling myself. Listening to pain and anguish every day will do that to you. I just needed rest. Some air. Maybe a little trip. I had money now. Enough to disappear for a few days. Clear my head. And if I still didn't feel right afterward, I'd find a therapist. God knows I probably needed one anyway. I took a detour from my apartment elevator to stroll through the lobby. I wanted to grab a few snacks from the shop beside the front desk before settling in for the night. I needed a bottle or two of something strong to drown out the sadness from my termination from the call center. I was crossing the front desk when I caught sight of something in the corner of my eye. I turned, and there it was again. Mabel, walking toward me from the lobby entrance. The sight gave me chills, but that feeling passed quickly. I felt steadier after the drive, more level-headed. I wasn't afraid. I was annoyed. This wasn't real. It had to be some elaborate prank, or a figment of my imagination. Either way, it couldn't hurt me. I just needed to prove it to myself. I looked around. Everyone else was just walking past. I held my hands out, desperate. Really? Nobody else is seeing this. I took a few deep breaths and started toward it. Hey, sir, why are you following me? I called out. The thing didn't say anything, just kept lurching forward. I stopped a few feet in front of it. The smell hit me first, sour, rotten. I winced at the sight of the bloated figure writhing and convulsing under its cheap Mabel disguise. Did you hear me? This isn't funny, creep. I'm going to get security. Chomp, a mouth. It tore open from the thing's stomach and bit off the finger I was waving at its chest. Just like that. Gone. I staggered back, screaming, clutching the bloody stump where my finger used to be. It kept limping forward. I screamed louder, begging for help. No one looked. No one even paused. I turned and bolted toward the stairs, blood dripping behind me. I was halfway up when I heard the stairway entrance slam open. It was coming. I reached my floor and sprinted down the hall. Fumbled my key out of my purse with trembling, bloody hands. Got the door open, locked it behind me. I backed away until my spine hit the wall at the other end of the apartment. I pulled my phone out and started dialing 911 with my good hand. Ring tone, then silence. No connection? I checked my service. Full bars. This didn't make any sense. I called friends, family, my hairstylist. Nothing. No ringtone. Just silence. I cursed and rushed the peephole. Nothing out there. Not yet. Just a wide, empty hallway. Blood was getting everywhere. I could feel my heartbeat in my hand from all the pain and swelling. I stumbled into my bedroom, wrapped my finger to stop the bleeding, and popped a few painkillers. Once it was taken care of, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, tried to get online. Email, social media, anything, blank screen, no connection. I sat down and cried. I didn't understand what was happening. Something was wrong. Not just with that thing in the hallway. Not just with me. Reality itself was broken. No one could hear me. No one could reach me. No one cared. I was isolated. Trapped. Food for something that wore my friend's skin. Maybe that was all that was left of her. Then it was here. I heard a few limping footsteps outside the door. The light underneath the front door was stifled by something large standing outside it. I held my breath, waiting, but nothing happened. It just sat there, doing nothing. I grabbed a knife and waited. It was bound to come in at some point, but it didn't. Hours passed. It was well into the night, and the shadow was still there. It didn't make sense. I fumbled with my phone. I needed to get in contact with someone. I knew it was futile, but I had to try again. But then I heard something. Not from the phone, from the door. It was Mabel. Hey, Ariana, I'm here. I need your help. I didn't move. I didn't speak. It was her voice. But it sounded wet, guttural, like it was her whispering through the mouth of a corpse. Don't ignore me. Say something. Anything? I need to know you're okay. It was monotone, no concern in its voice. I carefully walked to my bedroom. Then a loud bang. Don't walk away from me. Ariana. Talk. To me. The voice was deeper now. Less Mabel. More something else. I pushed my door closed with a soft click and covered my ears as a barrage of loud bangs broke out across the apartment. I heard them everywhere. My door, the ceiling above, the windows facing the city below. The sound passed after an hour. My body was so tired at this point. Partly exhaustion, partly the blood loss from my missing finger. I barricaded my door, clutched my phone, and rested my eyes in the empty bed. I slept maybe an hour or two before something woke me. I sprang up and looked toward the bedroom door. The shadow was under my bedroom door now. It had somehow gotten into my apartment. It was standing there the same way it had outside, but now it was here. I realized I couldn't escape this thing. Whatever it was going to get me, slowly but surely. It had no issue entering my apartment. It would have no problem breaking into my room. Maybe it was toying with me. Maybe it enjoyed the chase. I felt panic wash over me. Leave me alone. I screamed. I heard a soft laugh break out just outside the door. I returned to my phone. Started calling everyone in my contact list again. Silence every time. Like the world outside my apartment building just vanished. Then I realized something. I realized the silence didn't mean the calls were failing. They were going through. Every time. No ringing, no static. Just quiet. Someone on the other end was always there. Always listening. It was the call center. Every call I made was routed straight back to the center. I only figured it out because of a tiny, almost imperceptible sound. One you'd miss if you weren't desperate enough to listen for it. A spoon, scraping the bottom of a plastic parfait cup. Debbie, from work. Debbie? I said into the phone. No response. Of course not. Debbie wasn't her name. Just the one I gave her. None of us knew each other's names. That's how they designed it. Masks, code numbers, shift schedules that barely overlapped. Hey, I know you. Well, not know you, but we work together. Please, just say something. I think you can help me. Still nothing. And that's when it hit me. They wouldn't answer. Not ever. They couldn't. We don't speak. Not to them. It didn't matter what I said. How much I begged and cried. And could I really blame her? I ignored hundreds of calls just like this. That is when I broke. I started laughing. Loud, cracked, borderline hysterical. The same kind of laugh I heard from Mabel. That day she realized the truth. That she was calling the same people she sat next to every day. That none of us said a word. Not when it mattered. It was real. All of it. Real people. Real demons. God, those poor people. Men, women, and children. The poor children. The creature outside went quiet during my breakdown. Maybe it enjoyed my pain. Maybe it was hoping I'd walk out, still broken, right into its jaws. Once the laughter died, and I steadied my breathing, I felt a strange mental clarity. Could have been the painkillers, or sleep deprivation. Either way, I had an idea. If they respond, the creature moves on. That was my theory. I never got confirmation from Mabel, but she had tried it. She screamed into the phone until someone broke the rules. And the thing left her alone. At least that was a hope. I needed to get someone to answer, to break the rules. Like Mabel did. Like I did. I racked my brain for anything I knew about the people I worked with. Something, anything, that could crack their armor. Then it hit me, Martha. She was always working during my shift. The one with the crossword puzzles and clacking acrylics. The only reason she came to mind was because I knew something about her I shouldn't. We do our best to hide our identities. But every now and then something slips out. A phrase, the flash of a text on your personal phone, the hint of a tattoo. Her mistake was much more telling and easy to forget. One day I saw a brochure sticking out of her purse. Assisted living facility. I recognized the name. My mom had looked into it for my grandfather once. Nice place. Private rooms. Big windows. Expensive. Probably why Martha took the job. I grabbed the phone. Started dialing. Random numbers. Cold calling the call center. Over and over. Same silent line. Same hollow wait. I listened for her. I waited for familiar tap of nails on the cheap plastic desk. Fast, plasticky little clicks. Call. Hang up. Call. Hang up. Nothing. Was Martha even on rotation today? I started to feel hopeless. Outside the room, the door handle started to twitch. A soft rattle, like someone trying to figure out the lock. It would be in here soon. Then I heard it, the clacking of nails. I prepped the script in my mind. I had one chance. Hello, I said in the calmest voice I could manage. No answer. I take another shaky breath before continuing. I'm calling because your family member at Woodbrooks is in the middle of a situation here. I hope this was the right angle. During my time working there, every call was frantic, desperate, just like me. But I couldn't show it. Not if I expected this to work. Nobody at the call center would expect something so calm and collected. The clacking stopped. I had her attention. Now I needed to drive it home. Sorry to call this line. Someone at the call center said it was your work line. I just need to confirm some information. Let's start with your last name. I bit my tongue as the door began to unlock. It creaked open slowly. The barricade of furniture slid across the floor like it was a pile of empty boxes. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. What stood there wasn't wearing Mabel's skin anymore. That was gone, sloughed off like wet clothing. What remained was something raw, a bundle of dark flesh, tentacles and mouths writhing in slow, deliberate motion, snapping, smacking, clicking wetly against each other. They turned toward me slowly. The bundle of wiry flesh writhed towards me in unison. I closed my eyes and tried to keep my voice level. Ma'am, this is an emergency. If I don't get directive right now, I will need to call 911. I felt warmth descending upon my face. 100 little mouths breathing on my skin in anticipation. Then she spoke. "Is my mom okay?" she asked. The sound of her voice felt like a lifeline being caught in the middle of the ocean. I opened my eyes. To my surprise, the thing was gone. I caught just the tip of a black tendril vanishing around the corner toward my front door. I grabbed the phone again. "Listen, this isn't Woodbrook. I used to work with you. Something's coming for you. The call center. It intercepts your calls. You need to get someone to respond." The line went dead. I stood there useless. I didn't even know her name. Didn't know what she looked like. And yet, I may have just sentenced her to a fate worse than what happened to me. Or Mabel. I felt sick. I didn't leave my apartment for weeks. I needed time to process everything. I'm in a better headspace now. You can thank a lot of expensive therapy for that. I got into this job for the money. I didn't care about the calls. I told myself they were fake. But that was a lie. The truth is, I was desperate. I don't know if I would have taken the job if I'd known what was really going on. Honestly, I probably still would have. That's what scares me. But now, I have a new purpose. A better one. I'm going to end the call center. I don't know how yet, but I'm working on it. I owed it to Mabel and Martha. I don't care if I go broke, if I lose everything. There are more important things than money in this life. And this place is going to learn that the hard way. Until then, you've been warned. Don't accept a job from the call center that ignores desperate people, real people, scared people being chased by a real threat. I managed to make it out, but most people won't be so lucky. Most people will be hiding in their homes, crying, pleading, begging a bunch of corporate morons in masks to save them from something truly evil. But if you already work in a place like the call center, it isn't too late. If you can help, help. Don't sit idly by and listen to injustice. Don't let the corporations tell you it's all synthetic garbage. Use your own judgment. Be kind. Be curious. You may just save someone's life. Story 3. I found a door to nowhere. I'm posting this because I don't want to forget. Forgetting's a terrible thing. My friend would always say that. Once, I asked him why. It was late. The two of us were sitting in this field, and he said something like, "That's when things really die." He was staring up at the starry night sky, a million pinpricks of silver on a pitch-black canvas. "What do you mean, really die?" I looked over at him. He was an eccentric guy. Always seemed like he was off somewhere else. Maybe somewhere up there among the sea of stars. "You see that?" He pointed at the sky. "The stars." I gave him a puzzled look. "It takes forever for their light to get here. Some of them probably aren't even there anymore, but we can still see them." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Those stars might be long dead, but they're still shining up there." He laid back on the grass, a melancholy smile on his face. A few weeks later, we were hanging out in that field again, stargazing. Whenever he wasn't talking about something vague and philosophical, he'd be talking about the stars. Ever since we were little, he said he wanted to be an astronomer. Sometimes he would get this glint in his eye and say he wanted to see what else was up there. That adventurous side of him always got us into trouble. He must have dragged me to abandoned buildings a million times. In all honesty, I loved every second of it. He was my best friend for as many reasons as there were stars in the sky, and that was one of them. It's just that our latest adventure wound up being more than trouble. Somehow, something caught his eye more than the stars that night. It was a door. It wasn't on the ground, toppled over. It was standing there, a few feet from where we usually stargazed. When did that get there? I asked him, half joking. I'm not sure. I could always tell when something piqued his curiosity just by that glint in his eye. Something about it always got me worked up too. Want to go open it? I wasn't really asking, just saying what we were both thinking. We walked over to the door. It was painted a glossy black, speckled with shining silver. Its handle shimmered dimly in the moonlight. We'd never seen this door on any of the countless nights we spent here, and suddenly here it was, a solitary door standing in our field. My friend didn't waste any time, reaching for the handle as soon as it was within arm's reach. The handle turned with a satisfying click, and he promptly pushed it open. But what we saw on the other side wasn't more of the same old field. No, on the other side there wasn't any grass, or the distant glow of fireflies. An inky black sky painted with streaks of silver stretched endlessly outward. If the sky here was a sea of stars, what was behind this door must have been the other six. Needless to say, my friend was on the other side without a second thought, and I was soon after. What felt like sand crunched beneath my feet. An ivory white expanse surrounded us. Towering, glossy black structures dotted the landscape in front of us. Some of them looked uncannily similar to abandoned warehouses we visited, and others were towering obelisks bent over and sinking into the sand. Holy shit, he said, what both of us were thinking this time. Yeah, where do we go first? He looked back at me with that glint in his eye. How about there? I pointed at the closest structure. It was a large rectangular building, dark and imposing. We walked for a while, and quickly realized it was farther than either of us thought. It towered into the sky. Standing at its base made it seem like it went on forever. Its walls were smooth, and on closer inspection, marble with a brilliant silver. It shone dimly like cracks of sunlight through the curtains on a lazy summer afternoon. What stood out more to me than all of that was that it didn't have a door. A rectangular hole abruptly interrupted its otherwise seamless surface. We got to see what the inside looks like. He was starting to sound more and more worked up. That glint in his eyes was less of a glint now, and more like a shine, like the silver marbling, like the silver speckled sky, like long dead stars that refuse to be forgotten. We paused for a moment, peering into the enigmatic structure before us. An endless dark sat inside, not an inky black like the sky, but a strange foreboding emptiness. It was as if the darkness in that place was more than an absence of light. I guess I should say that it was less than that. A soft crunch coming from the inside pierced the silence of that moment. Then we realized something was there. Two silvery pinpricks of light. No, it wasn't quite silver. There was this yellow tinge to them that gave them an otherworldly glow. Another soft crunch. We stepped back. Something was wrong. The novelty of this place had run its course, and we began to realize just how alien it was. It was like I was little again, standing at the bottom of the stairs just as I had shut off the light. These stars that stared at us from the dark were not ours, not the ones we had watched for years on end. Those ghastly, yellow will-o'-wisps stared back at us. What is that? I couldn't answer his question then. I still can't. In an instant, or maybe even less than that, they were gone. Those strange yellow lights. Him. I whipped my head around frantically, wordlessly. I tried to call out over and over, but one thing escaped me. His name. I wandered that barren place for what felt like an eternity, searching for something, anything to point me toward that glint in his eye, that light like long dead stars. I couldn't find it. Couldn't find him, anything of him. Just as I had given up, it was there, in its awful glossy black and sterling silver, not toppled over on the ground. It stood there, waiting. That door. Before I knew it, I found myself turning that handle and stepping through. There it was, that serene field, the quiet chirp of crickets and the soft glow of fireflies. But something was missing. There was this indescribable emptiness to moment, a bottomless nothing that lurked there. I looked up toward the sky one last time before I left. The brilliant silver I had become so accustomed to a stained yellow. He said forgetting's a terrible thing. But how can I remember when I never even knew what was in the first place? I'm sure both of us thought that door would go nowhere. Story 4. Change. I'm not sure what just happened, and neither is my boyfriend. We're both spooked and looking for answers we'll likely never find. For context, Tim and I have lived together for 2 years, and honestly have never had any serious fights. Some important details. He's bald. He shaved his head last year when he decided it would look better than having thinning hair. This has never caused any issues with my attraction to him, and he knows that. He works a job that sometimes has him leaving town for short stretches of time. Normally, he's gone for just a few nights and will tell me if plans change and he's staying later or coming home earlier than expected. And finally, he's incredibly kind. Our arguments don't end in raised voices, and definitely don't end in name-calling or abuse. I've been belittled and verbally abused by past partners, so I know a bad man when I see one. He isn't one. At the end of last week, Tim left for one of his work trips and said he would be gone until Tuesday morning. I dropped him off at the airport on Friday evening and began my weekend alone with our 2 cats. He didn't call me at all while he was gone. This was unusual, but I figured he must be busy, so I brushed it off. He had sent me a "just landed" text later on Friday, which was good enough for me. I woke up on Monday morning to a freezing house. It's currently about 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit every day where I live, and I never keep the AC too cold for my comfort. When I checked the temperature, it showed the same number it always does despite the air around me feeling frigid. The cats were cuddled together on the couch under our throw blanket. As I was deciding whether or not to simply turn up the room temperature, the front door opened and my boyfriend shuffled in. "Hi." I greeted him, confused but excited to see him. I was sure I hadn't gotten a "coming home today" text from him, but I could have missed it. As surprised as I was by his early return, I was more puzzled by the beanie on his head. Who wears a beanie in July? And why had I never seen him wear this dark blue one before? Tim said nothing, aggressively threw his duffel bag down at my feet and shuffled down the hall to our bedroom. I followed him and asked him how his trip went. He grunted in response and slammed the bedroom door. Immediately, the worst assumptions ran through my mind. Maybe he'd lost his job. Maybe he, for some out-of-the-blue reason, assumed I had done something to break his trust while he was gone. I knocked on the bedroom door. "Can we talk?" I asked sheepishly. Tim opened the door and stood there staring at me menacingly. "You were supposed to call me, and you didn't," he said with a coldness in his voice I had never heard before. He hadn't asked me to call him, and as I've stated, normally he's the one who calls me throughout these trips. "I mean, I'm sorry, but..." I started to reply. Tim pushed past me, stomped over to the living room couch, threw his beanie across the room, and sat down, crossing his arms over his chest. That's when I noticed he had hair again. Not just a tiny bit of fuzz like he was due for a shave, but didn't get around to it. He had the exact amount of hair he'd had right before he made the decision to go bald, with the same thinning pattern. The entire house was still very cold, but the air immediately around Tim felt especially frigid. "Why didn't you call me, you fucking bitch?" he demanded when he finally spoke again. His voice was so loud that it scared the cats out of the room. I didn't answer. I couldn't form an answer. Tears welling in my eyes, I turned away from him and started toward the kitchen. As I was hastily cooking some scrambled eggs and trying to calm myself, I glanced back and saw Tim staring at me from the doorway. His arms were slack at his sides, and his eyes were empty and dead. The air in the kitchen began to feel colder. He stood there just like that the entire time I cooked. It wasn't just that Tim was being harsh toward me for seemingly no reason. The entire aura around him fell off. This was Tim, but it was all wrong. I offered him a plate of eggs, but he didn't respond or even sit at the table with me. As I ate, he retreated to the bedroom and stood watching me behind the partially closed door. He stayed in our bedroom in complete silence for the rest of the morning. I left for work after an hour, hoping things would maybe get a little less weird after we had some time apart. I returned home late that night to an extraordinarily cold house. Every room felt like a walk-in freezer. The light was on in our bedroom, but Tim was still shut inside. I decided to sleep on the couch, though Tim's presence still creeped me out even from behind that closed door. But when I woke up the next morning, the light was off in our bedroom and Tim was gone. Normally, he would take a day off of work after traveling, so I hadn't expected him to be at work that morning. The temperature in the house felt normal again. I reached for my phone and saw a text from Tim. "Just landed," it said. It was sent an hour ago. Then I noticed I had several missed calls from Tim from over the last several days. Calls that hadn't come through at all. He left a voicemail early this morning. As I was listening to it, the front door opened and Tim walked in. "Hello," he shouted in his usual cheerful way. He set his duffel bag down gently along the wall and pulled me into a hug. His hair was gone. "Sorry to surprise you," he said. "I decided to take a lift home instead of calling you so early to pick me up." I told Tim what I'd experienced yesterday. I told him all about how creepy and mean he'd been acting and how I hadn't been getting any phone calls. And now we're both trying to figure who or what was in our house with me. Story 5. My friends left the party hours ago, but I know they're still here. 2 nights ago, I hosted a small gathering of sorts. I had just finalized my divorce from my ex-husband and moved into my own apartment. He was a controlling, silent, and unpredictable man for the entirety of our 5-year marriage. So obviously, my friends were happy for me. This congrats. A man isn't ruining your life anymore. Party was not even my idea. It was theirs. I spent that evening arranging charcuterie on paper plates and pouring red wine into Walmart paper cups. That's how you know you're really living your best life. No real utensils. But somehow the fancy salami and cheese still made the budget. Honestly, the place is a bit small and unfurnished. I have a decent job, but as it turns out, lawyers aren't cheap. Still, I'm now the proud owner of a 700 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment on the 9th floor of a building that's definitely seen better days. I can't complain though. It's just me and my thoughts. Or it was. All of that to say, this place is empty. There's no comfort here, not yet. Anyway, it doesn't feel like mine. I've been here about 2 weeks, and I haven't found the motivation to decorate, or really to do anything at all. After getting myself ready and laying out a few blankets on the floor, the only seating option, unless everyone wanted to pile onto my sad little air mattress, I took a deep breath and waited for people to arrive. I was excited. I swear I miss my friends. It felt like months since I'd had real, loving human contact. "So glad you made it," I said to each of them as they walked through the door. We traded hugs and warm little reassurances. "Good for you, girl. You're better off without him. I'm so jealous. I'd love to live on my own again." I love my friends. Truly, most of them are in stable, loving relationships. Many have children. Some run small Etsy businesses that actually thrive. They are determined. They're indestructible monuments to motivation and determined women. I sound jealous because I am. I do not have enough pride to pretend that I'm not. The party was great. We laughed too loudly, drank too much cheap wine, and for a few hours, it almost felt like nothing in my life had ever fallen apart. It's important to surround yourself with other women, the only people who can truly know you. Even if they didn't fully understand what I'd been through, their presence filled the empty corners of this place with something close to warmth. When they started leaving around 11 p.m., I felt a sudden, aching sadness. We traded hugs and cheek kisses. I watched them disappear down the hallway one by one, then finished the last of the wine alone. That's when it all went wrong. Knock, knock, knock. The rattling door interrupted my sulking. I figured one of the girls had left something behind. A wallet? Car keys? I scanned the room but didn't see anything obvious. This is a problem with being too wine drunk. Everything blurs. I didn't think twice. I hobbled to the door and cracked it open. All 10 of my friends were standing there, smiling, too widely, their eyes blue wide with dilated pupils, as if they'd just seen something divine or unspeakable, or both. "Mind if we come in?" they asked in perfect unison. I didn't even have time to squeak out a response. The door swung fully open, and they pushed past me both too fast and too forcefully. I stumbled back, hitting my face hard against the closet door. Jesus, what the hell? I gasped, clutching my cheek, but they didn't acknowledge me. They just filed into the middle of the room, and sat cross-legged in a circle on the floor. They giggled, still perfectly synchronized, and locked eyes on me. How drunk was I? Surely this couldn't be happening. I must have passed out. I must be dreaming. That makes sense. Yes, that has to be it. I burst out laughing. I didn't know what else to do. Then the laughter cracked, and then I was sobbing. The friends said nothing. They weren't even blinking, just smiling and staring at me, as if I was supposed to perform for them. Get out, I whispered through my ragged breaths. Please. Even the air in the room was still. Nobody moved, not even me. I stood there for what felt like hours. The overhead light hummed softly. My knees started to shake. My throat was dry. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to move. I stepped over the threshold into the room. No one reacted. Not when I walked past them. Not when I cried. Not even when I collapsed onto the bathroom floor and threw up. When I came back out, they were still sitting there. Still smiling. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I curled up on my air mattress and pulled the blanket over my head like a child. Like that would do anything. I realized I should have called the police. I should have slept somewhere else. I should have done anything but stay there. But I was scared. All I have ever known is staying somewhere that didn't want me. Now, even my own space didn't want me there anymore. By morning, they were gone. Physically, anyway. It's hard to explain, but I can still feel them here. I just can't see them. Sometimes I catch a pair of eyes blinking at me from the darkened hallway. Most days, there's extra trash in the bin, dishes in the sink I don't remember using. My friends have been texting, worried. I send back short replies, usually something vague about adjusting to the new place. They want to visit again, but I can't let them. I'm too afraid. Their faces are ruined now, corrupted by what I saw that night. It took me time to accept that I'm sharing this space with something else. Ghosts or whatever, I'm not sure what they are. I just know they're not leaving. And the truth is, I'm not alone. But this kind of company doesn't comfort you. It just fills the silence with a weight you can't shake, a presence you can't hold. And it's not unfamiliar. Living with them feels eerily similar to living with someone who never really saw you. The hollowness is the same. So is the cold. Sometimes when I'm too tired, too lonely to care, I whisper into the silence, "Okay, you can come in." And every time, the door creaks open, but no one ever walks in. Story 6. I woke up in a desolate ocean. There was no life there. A wave tumbles playfully into my face, rocking me back and forth. The ocean bubbled in jubilation. I scanned the horizon in all directions and saw nothing but an endless expanse of water. Where am I? Who am I? These questions lit my mind on fire, and I racked my mind in search of an answer which could extinguish the flame, but I found nothing, and my mind remained inflamed as even more questions bubbled up, each more thought-provoking than the last. Water rose and fell all around me. My feet failed to brace against anything solid, and salty water covered me completely, occasionally pulling my head under. The horizon remained equally empty in every direction, consisting of nothing but an expanse of ocean which seemed to consume everything in my sight. I put my head below, vigilantly observing the water which surrounded me. Through the darkness, I can vaguely see a sandy surface with a pattern carved by the flow of water deep below the surface. Stone cylindrical pipes spiraled out of the sand with twists and turns on its surface, resembling a snake. The pattern in the sand remained undisturbed, with nothing growing out of the ocean floor. And besides me, I saw no movement in the waters. I realized that there was no life here, no fishes, no coral, no algae, nothing. This ocean was abandoned. All life either jumped ship or didn't exist here to begin with. The oddity of my situation puzzled me, but I lacked the pieces to see the full picture. Above me, the desolate night sky was tall and distant. Stars were missing, and the melancholy moon sat alone in the deserted sky. A few days passed, and during that time, I wonder how I came to be here. I can't find any memories in my head of a time before I had awoken here. I wonder if I have any loved ones. If so, Did they miss me? Are they searching for me? I imagine the face of someone I love and see nothing in my head, which makes me cry, but the ocean wipes my tears for me. Although I have not eaten for a few days, I don't feel hungry, and even though there's water surrounding me, I've not drank any nor do I feel thirsty. The water gives me no moment to be still. A current or wave constantly rocks me. Perhaps the ocean is fearful that I may leave it too. I've chased the horizon in every direction and found a disappointing amount of nothingness. The restless ocean has pushed me around constantly, and I've not slept since I woke up. Not like I feel tired enough to sleep in the first place. The moon sits unmovingly in the same spot every day. I've yet to see the sun rise. Is there even a sun here? I've gotten much better at swimming because the ocean and I began playing together a lot more. If I tapped my hand twice against the water, it would bring a wave that would sweep me away before crashing on my head. I would dive and the water would create a current around me that would propel me incredibly fast. Our playing lasted a few days. The playful waves suddenly stopped and the music of water bubbling, rising and crashing was cut, creating a silence loud enough for me to hear a slight humming coming out from the water. I dived and swam in the direction of the hum, which led me above one of the stone cylinders. Along the cylinder, there were rocks which glowed with a dim shade of blue. I'm drawn to the glowing rocks and my arms attempt to propel me in its direction, but as I approach, a pressure builds in my head. My skull feels like it's being crushed and is moments away from shattering, and reflexively, I resurface. Over a couple days, the glowing intensifies, and I've made attempts to get to it, resurfacing each attempt due to the same intense pressure. The lonely ocean remains silent and dejected, and I attempt to play again, but the water ignores my attempts. A pain grows in my stomach, one which I recognize as hunger, and my lips become cracked and rough from dryness. The glowing intensifies more, and the audible hum becomes a shaking buzz. The glowing rocks beckons to me strongly, and my attention becomes centered around the rocks alone. I try again to swim down, but the pressure sends me back up again. My eyelids become heavier, and my sluggish limbs begin to get cold. Solemnly, the glowing rocks and I share glances. They look an inquisitive one, almost as if asking, "Your time is almost up. What's your move?" I knew my time was near its end. So in a final attempt, I pushed beyond the pressure. My head exploded with an almost crippling pain. The back of my eyes radiated pain through my face, and my headache felt like my brain was being stabbed each time my heart beat. Each stroke was difficult. The water became viscous around my arms, increasing in viscosity by the second until it felt like swimming through molasses. My diaphragm began battling me, trying to force me to take a breath as my hollow lungs cried out from being stabbed with pins and needles. Time was obscure, but I eventually got close to the rocks. With my arms outstretched, I felt a comforting warmth penetrate my fingertips. The warmth grew my determination, and with extreme difficulty, I made one final stroke and touched the rock with my fingertips, and in an instant all the pressure vanished. The pain was gone. I found myself at the surface of the water, and I filled my lungs with air as soon as I could. In an instant I knew that everything was different. I saw cloudy skies, birds were singing, the ocean played joyfully, ignoring my presence this time. Looking under the water, I saw a school of fishes wandering around together. I saw calm jellyfishes floating carelessly and almost meditatively, and I saw a shoreline not too far away from me. I swam over the shoreline, and in an instant a chubby caramel man with frizzy hair, wearing blue shorts, ran up to me. "Roy, I've been looking everywhere for you, man. Where were you? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice high and frantic. I didn't respond, not aware that he's speaking to me, as I've still not remembered anything. "Holy shit, you look horrible. Your lips are all dried up and your skin looks like you've been in the water for days. It's so wrinkly." At this point I pieced 1 and 2 together and realized he was talking to me. This man turned out to be named James. We've been best friends since childhood, but my memory has still not returned. I did have loved ones, and they did miss me. Doctors say that I have amnesia. I've also told them about the ocean, but they've tried to convince me that it was a hallucination. But I can't get that ocean out of my head. I think about it often. I wonder if it's found any new friends, or if it's still alone. Sometimes I go back to the ocean that I resurfaced at and search for the rocks, but I never find them. My heart aches of guilt, having abandoned that ocean. I miss it, although there was nothing there but the water. Within that endless expanse of water, there was peace. Story 7. Omnigel, your antidote to the poison of reality. It's weightless, carbohydrate-free, and keto-friendly. It's non-toxic, locally sourced, and cruelty minimized. It's silky smooth, rejuvenating, invigorating, handcrafted, all natural, exclusive, for the everyman, state-of-the-art, older than time itself. The executive abruptly paused his list of platitudes. I think he caught on to my sharp inhale and slightly pursed lips. I swallowed the yawn as politely as I could, keeping a smile plastered to my face in the meantime. Seemed like the damage had already been done, though. I heard his wing-tipped shoes tapping against the linoleum floor. His chiseled jawline clenched and his eyes narrowed. Sure, my disinterest was maybe a bit rude, but in my defense, I ain't the one investing in the product. Barely had the capital to invest in the 6 to 8 Miller Lights that nursed me to sleep the night prior. No, I was a guinea pig. Guinea pigs don't need the sales pitch. Please continue, I stammered. His features loosened, but they didn't unwind completely. It's Omnigel, your antidote to the poison of reality, he finished, each syllable throbbing with a borderline religious seal. I clapped until it became clear that he didn't want me to clap, face grimacing in response. So I bit my lip and waited for instruction. The impeccably dressed executive walked the length of the boardroom, his right hand trailing along the table's polished mahogany, until he towered over me. I rose to meet him, but his palm met my collarbone and pushed me back into my seat. "Don't get up," he said, now grinning from ear to ear. "Let me ask you a question, Frederick. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to be something? Are you ready to cast off the shackles of hopeless mediocrity, your plebeian birthright, vulgar in every sense of the word, and ascend to something greater? More importantly, do you believe I am merciful enough to grant that to you?" I didn't quite understand what he was asking me, but I became uncomfortably aware of my body as he monologued. My stagnant, garlic-ridden breath, the cherry-red gingivitis crawling along my gum line, my ghoulish hunchback, and my bulging potbelly, the sensation of my tired heart beating against my flimsy rib cage. Eventually, I spat out a response, but I did not get up, and I did not meet his gaze. "Well, sir, I'm just here to get paid. And I apologize. I'm not used to the whole dog and pony show. Usually I just take the pills and report the side effects. But I'm appreciative of..." He cut me off. "That's exactly the answer I was looking for, Frederick. I'll have my people swing around and pick you up. We'll begin tonight. Your new lodging should be nearly ready," he remarked. "I'm not going home." I asked. "No, you're not going home, Frederick," he replied. "What about my car?" The tapping of his wingtips started up again as he dialed his cell phone. "What car?" he muttered. "The car I used to drive there. Obviously, a beat-up sedan that was a lone blemish in a parking lot otherwise gleaming with BMWs and Lamborghinis." I was going to explain that I needed my car, but he was chatting with someone by the time I worked up the courage to speak again. It seemed important. I didn't want to interrupt. Could figure out how to get my car later, I supposed. The limousine was nice, undeniably. Don't think I'd been in a limo since prom. That said, I didn't appreciate the secrecy. No one informed me of our destination. Nobody mentioned it was a goddamn hour outside the city. After 30 minutes passed, I was knocking on the black tinted partition, asking the driver if they had any updates or an ETA, but they didn't respond. I stepped out of the parked car, loose gravel crunching under my feet. The executive had already arrived, and he was leaning against a separate, longer, more luxurious-appearing limousine. He sprang up and strolled towards me, arms outstretched as if he could pull me into a hug or something. Thankfully, he just wrapped one arm around my shoulder, his Rolodex ticking in my ear. "Frederick, happy to see you made it." Well, thanks, sir, but where are we?" I scanned my surroundings. There was a warehouse, this monstrous bastion of rusted steel and disintegrating concrete that seemed to pierce the skyline, and little else. No trees, no telephone poles, no billboards, just flat, dirt-coated earth in nearly every direction. I couldn't even tell where the unpaved gravel connected to a proper road. It just sort of evaporated into the horizon. The executive began sauntering toward the warehouse, tugging me along. He winked and said, "Well, my boy, you're home, of course." "What do you mean? And what does this have to do with Ovigil?" "Omnigel," he quickly corrected. The word plummeted from his tongue like a guillotine, razor sharp and heavy with judgment. I shut my mouth and focused on marching in lockstep with the executive. A few silent seconds later, we were in front of a door. I didn't even notice there was a door until he was reaching for the knob. The entrance was tiny and without signage, barely a toenail on the foot of the Colossus, blending seamlessly into the corrugated metal wall. He twisted the knob and pushed forward, moving aside and gesturing for me to enter first. The creaking of its ungreased hinges emanated into the warehouse. The inside was dark but not lightless. Strangely, tufts of fake grass drifted over the bottom of the frame, shiny plastic blades wavering in a gentle breeze that I couldn't feel from the outside. "Let me know if anything looks familiar," he whispered. Fearful of upsetting him again, I wandered into the belly of the beast, but I was wholly ill-prepared for what awaited me. I crossed the threshold. Before long, I couldn't move. Bewilderment stitched my feet to the ground. When he claimed I was home, he hadn't lied. No figure of speech, no metaphor. It looked like I was standing on my neighbor's lawn. I crept along the astroturf until I was standing in the middle of a road. My head swung like a pendulum, peering from one side of the street to the other. I felt woozy and stumbled back. Fortunately, the wall of the warehouse was there to catch me. Everything had been painstakingly recreated. The Halloween decorations of Peterson's refused to haul into their garage, skeletons erupting from the earth aside their rose garden. The placement of the sewer grates. The crater-sized pothole that I forget to avoid coming home from the liquor store time and time again. My house. My family's house. The time-bitten 3-story colonial I grew up in, it was there too. Why? How did you dash? The feeling of the executive once again curling his muscular biceps around my shoulder shut me up. Pretty neat, huh? You see, we need to know how people will use Omnigel in the wild. And when we heard tale of your legendary compliance to the grapevine, we felt confident that you'd agree to participate in this unorthodox study. He reeled me into his chest, slow and steady like a fishing line, and once I was snugly fixed aside, he started dragging me towards my ersatz home. From there it was simple. City Hall lent us some blueprints. We found a suitable location, called in a few favors from Hollywood set designers, a few more favors from some local architects, but I'm sure you're not interested in the nitty-gritty. You said it yourself, you're here to get paid. My shaky feet stepped from the road to the sidewalk. Even though it was the afternoon, it was the middle of the night in the warehouse. The streetlights were on. There were no stars in the sky, or rather, there are none attached to the ceiling. How far back did the road go? How many houses had they built? I couldn't tell. Every single detail was close to perfect, 0.001% off from a truly identical facsimile. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that iota of dissonance might as well have been a hot needle in my eye. The tiny grain of friction between my memories and what they had created was unbearable. The floorboards of my patio winced under pressure, like they were supposed to, but the sound wasn't quite right. "Frederick, we wanted you to experience the bliss of Omnigel in the comfort of your home, but at the end of the day, we're a pharmaceutical company. Science, statistics, objectivity. They're a coven of cruel, unyielding mistresses, but we're beholden to their demands nonetheless, and they demand we have control." The air that wafted out of the foyer when we walked inside correctly smelled of mold, but it was slightly too clean. Thus, we built you this very generous compromise. Your home away from home. The family photographs hung too low. The ceramic of the bowl that I'd throw my keys into after a shift at the bar was the wrong shade of brown. The floor mat was too weathered. Or maybe it wasn't weathered enough. The only meaningful difference anyway, is the Omni Gel we left for you on the dining room table. I won't bother giving you a tour. Feels redundant, don't you think? Now, my instructions for you are very straightforward. Live your life as you normally would. Use the Omni Gel as you see fit. We're paying you by the hour. Stay as long as you'd like. When you're done, just walk outside, and a driver will take you home. I spied an unlabeled mason jar half-filled, with grayish oil at the center of my dining room table. I turned around. The executive loomed in the doorway. Don't know when he let go of my shoulder. He chuckled and lit a cigarette. What a peculiar thing to say. When you're done here in your home, walk outside and we'll take you home. Goosebumps butted down my torso. I felt my heartbeat behind my eyes. How? How much will you be paying me an hour? He responded with a figure that doesn't bear repeating here, but know that the dollar amount was truly obscene. And the Omni Gel, what do I do with it? Is it a skin cream or a condiment? Some sort of mechanical lubricant? Or... The executive took a long, blissful drag. He exhaled. As a puff of smoke billowed from his lips, he let the still-lit cigarette fall into the palm, and then he crushed the roiling ember in his hand. He grinned and gave me an answer. Yes. His cell phone began ringing. The executive spun away from me and picked up the call, strutting across the patio. Yup, correct. Turn it all on. The warehouse, my neighborhood. Word to life of the quiet melody of suburbia. A dog barking. The wet clicking of a sprinkler. Children laughing. A car grumbling over the asphalt. Not sure how long I stood there, just listening. Eventually, I tiptoed forward. My eyes peeked over the doorframe. The street was empty and motionless. No kids or canines or cars, and I couldn't see the executive. I was home alone in the warehouse, somewhere outside the city. It took a while, but I managed to tear myself away from the doorframe. I shuffled into the living room, plopped down in my recliner, and clicked on the TV. Might as well make some money, right? Honestly, I adjusted quickly. Sure, the perpetual night was strange. It made maintaining a circadian rhythm challenging. I had to avoid looking outside. 2. Hearing the white noise while seeing the street vacant fractured the immersion 20 ways to Sunday. If reality ever slipped in, if I ever became unnerved, the dollar amount I was being paid per hour would flash in my head, and I'd settle. Grabbing a beer from the fridge, a self-satisfied smile grew across my face. What a dumb plan, I thought. I didn't even have to try the product. The executive told me to use Omni Gel as I saw fit. Well, I don't see fit to use it at all. I'll just hang here until I've accumulated enough money to retire. No risk, all reward. As I was returned to my recliner, I caught a glimpse of the mason jar. I slowed to a stop. But I mean, what if I leave without trying it and the executive ends up being aggravated with me? They must have spent a fortune to set this all up. I could just try it once, and that'd be that. I unscrewed the container's lid and popped it open, expecting to smell a puff of noxious air, given the cadaverous gray-black coloration of its contents. To my surprise, there were no fumes. I put my nose to the rim and sniffed. No smell at all. Actually, cautiously, I smeared a dab the size of a Hershey's Kiss onto my pinky. It looked like something you dredge up from the depths of a fast food grease trap, but it didn't feel like that. It wasn't slick or slimy. Despite being a liquid, it didn't feel moist. No, it was nearly weightless and dry as a bone to the touch, similar to cotton candy. Guess I'll rub a little on the back of my hand and call it a day. Right before the substance touched my skin, a burst of high-pitched static exploded from somewhere within the house. I jumped and lost my footing on the way down, my ass hitting the floor with a painful thud. My heart pounded against the back of my throat. After a handful of crackles and feedback whines, a deep voice uttered a single word. No. One more prolonged mechanical shriek. A click, and that was it. Ambient noise dripped back into my ears. I spun my head, searching for a speaker system. Nothing in the dining room. I pulled my aching body upright and began pacing the perimeter of my first floor. Nothing. I stomped up the stairs. No signs of in my bedroom or the upstairs bathroom. I yanked the drawstring to bring down the attic steps and proceeded with my search. Nothing there either, but it was alarmingly empty. None of my old furniture was where it should have been. Over the course of a few moments, confusion devolved into raw, unbridled disorientation. My first floor, my bedroom, my furniture. What the fuck was I thinking? I wasn't at home. I was in a house, on a street, within a warehouse, in the middle of nowhere. Sleep didn't come easily. The dreams that followed weren't exactly restful either. In the first one, I was sitting on a bench in an oddly shaped room, with pink-tinted walls that seemed to curve towards me. I kept peering down at my watch. I was waiting for something to happen, or maybe I just couldn't leave. My stomach began gurgling. Sickness churned in my abdomen. It got worse and worse and worse, and then it happened. I was unzipped from the inside. The flesh above my abdomen neatly parted like waves of the biblical Red Sea, and a gore-stained Moses stuck his hands out, gripping the ends of my skin and wrenching me open, sternum to navel. It wasn't painful, nor did I experience fear. I observed the man burrow out my innards and splatter at my feet with a passing curiosity. A TV show that I let hover on screen only because there wasn't something more interesting playing on the other channels. He was a strange creature, undeniably, only 2 feet tall, naked as the day he was born, caked in viscera and convulsing on the salmon-colored floor with pathetic intensity. Eventually, he ceased his squirming. He took a moment to catch his breath, sat up, and brushed the hair from his face. I was surprised to discover that he looked like me, smaller. Sure, but the resemblance was indisputable. He smiled at me, but he had no teeth to bare, unadorned pink gums to match the pink walls. I smiled back to be polite. Then he pointed up, calling attention to our shared container, where the walls of mucosa. I wondered, in other words, were we both confined within a different person's stomach? He clapped and summoned a blood-soaked cheer from his nascent vocal cords, as if responding to things I didn't say out loud. I looked back at him and scowled. The correction I offered was absurd, but it seemed to make sense at the time. No, you idiot. We're not in the stomach. Where's the acid? And the walls are much too polished to be living, I claimed. He tilted his head and furrowed his brow. Look again. The answer is simple. We're in a mason jar that someone's holding. The pink color is obviously their palm being pressed into the glass. This seemed to anger him. His eyes bulged and he dove for my throat, snarling like a starving coyote. Then I woke up in a bedroom. Days passed uneventfully. I drank beer. I watched TV. I imagined the ludicrous amount of money accumulating in my bank account. I slept. My dreams became progressively less surreal. Most of the time, I just dreamt that I was home, drinking beer and watching TV. One evening, maybe about a week in, I dreamt of consuming the Omni gel, something I'd been choosing to ignore. In the dream, I drove a teaspoon into the jar and put a scoop close to my lips. When I wasn't chastised by some electric voice rumbling from the walls, I placed the oil into my mouth. I wanted to see what it tasted like, and my God, the feeling that followed its consumption was euphoric. Even though it was just a dream, I didn't need much more convincing. I woke up, sprang out of bed, marched into the dining room, picked up the jar, untwisted the lid, dug my fingers into the oil, and put them knuckle deep into my mouth. Why bother with a teaspoon? No one was watching. I mean, I don't know if that's true. Someone was probably watching. What I'm saying is manners felt like overkill, and I was hungry for something other than alcohol. Just like in my dream, I wasn't scolded. But I wasn't filled with euphoria in the wake of consuming the Omni gel either. It didn't taste bad. It didn't taste good. The oil didn't really have any flavor to speak of, and I could barely sense it on my tongue. It slid down my throat like a gulp of hot air. Disappointing. I thought, no harm, no foul, though. I procured a liquid breakfast from the fridge, plodded over to the recliner, and clicked on the TV. The day chugged along without incident, same as the day before it, and I was remarkably content given the circumstances. Late that afternoon, a person's reflection paced across the screen. It was quick and the reflection was hazy, but it looked to be a woman in a crimson sundress with a silky black ponytail. Then I heard a feminine voice. "Honey, do you mind cooking tonight? Bailey's got soccer, so we won't be back till 7, she cooed. "Yeah, of course, Linda, no sweat," I replied. I felt the cold beer drip icy tears over my fingertips. A spastic muscle in my low back groaned, and I shifted my position to accommodate it. A smile very nearly crossed my lips. Then, all at once, my eyes widened. My head shot up like the puck on a carnival game after the lever had been hit with a mallet. I swung around and toppled out of the recliner, both the chair, and I crashed onto the floor. "Fuck!" I muttered, various twinges of pain firing through my body. "Who's there?" I screamed. "Who the fuck is there?" I bellowed. My fury echoed through the house, but received no response. Why would the company do that? Was she some actress? How'd they find someone who looks exactly like Linda? I perked my ears and waited. Nothing. Dead, oppressive silence. I couldn't even hear the artificial ambient noise that had been playing non-stop since my arrival. When did it stop? Why didn't I notice? The sound of small galloping against what erupted from the ceiling above me. Childlike laughter reverberated through the halls. "All right, that's it," I growled, climbing to my feet. I rushed through the home, slammed doors into plaster, flipped over mattresses, checked each and every room for intruders, rage coursing through my veins, but they were all empty. Eventually, I found myself in front of a drawstring, about to pull down the stairs to the attic. My hand crept into view, but it stopped before reaching the tassel. I brought it closer to my face. Beads of sweat spilled over my temples. I didn't understand. My fingers were covered in Omni-Gel. I started trembling. My whole body shook from the violent bouts of panic. My other hand went limp, and the noise of shattering glass pulled a scream from my throat. My neck creaked down until I was chin to chest. A fractured mason jar lay at my feet. Shards of glass stained with ivory-colored grease. I have to check. My quaking fingertips clasped the string. The stairs descended into place. I have to check. Each step forward was its own heart attack. I could practically hear clotted arteries clicking against each other in my chest like a handful of seashells. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. I just have to check. My eyes crept over the threshold. I held my breath. Empty. No furniture, no intruders, no nothing. Beautifully vacant. I began to release a massive sigh before I could completely exhale. However, I realized something. Slowly, I spun in place. The attic stairs weren't built directly into the wall. There was a little space behind me. A small perch, no more than 6 inches wide. My eyes landed on 2 pallid, bare feet. The skin was decorated with random patches of dark, circular discoloration, craters on the surface of the moon. But there weren't just 2. I noticed a line of moon-skinned feet in my peripheral vision. There were even a few pairs behind the ones closest to me. 2. They were all packed like sardines into this tiny, tiny space. Maybe I looked up. Maybe I didn't. Part of me thinks I couldn't bear to. The other part of me thinks I forced myself to forget. It doesn't matter. I screamed, leapt down the stairs, cracked my kneecaps on the floor. The injury didn't hold me back. Not one bit. I took nothing with me as I left. I raced across that faux street, irrationally nervous that I wouldn't find a door and the asphalt would just keep going on forever. But I did find the door. It was exactly where I left it. I yanked it open and threw my body out of the warehouse. Waning sunlight and a chorus of male laughter greeted me as I landed, curled up on the gravel and hyperventilating. "Don't have a conniption now. Old sport," a familiar voice said amidst the cackling. I twisted my head to face them. There were 3 men, each with a cigarette dangling between their lips. 2 were dressed like chauffeurs. The third's attire was impeccable and luxurious. What day is it?" I stuttered. The heavier of the 2 chauffeurs doubled over laughing. The executive walked closer and offered me a hand up. "Well, Frederick, the day is today," he exclaimed. "For your wallet's sake, I'd hoped you would last a little longer, but 2.5 hours is still a respectable payday." No, that's not right, I whispered. The executive's cell phone began ringing before I was entirely upright. He let go of my hand, and I nearly fell back down. As I steadied myself, the smaller chauffeur reached into his pocket, retrieved my phone, clicked aside to activate the screen light, and pointed to the date. He was right. I'd only been in the warehouse for 150 minutes. Give or take. I looked at the executive, my godhead in a well-pressed Italian suit, for an explanation, something to soothe my agonizing bewilderment. He turned away from me and started talking shop with whoever was on the other line. Already, I'd been forgotten. Did you get everything? All the vertigraphs? Uh-huh. Oh, wow. You're sure? 37? That's exceptionally high yield. Yes, agreed. He's one hungry boy, apparently. He looked over his shoulder, flashed me a grin, and winked. Slowly, painfully, I felt my lips oblige. I smiled back at him. Linda was thrilled to see the wad of cash I brought home. According to the orthodontist, Bailey will need braces sooner rather than later. I haven't told her about what I experienced. No, I simply told her they awarded me a bonus for my work ethic at the bar. It's been a few days since the warehouse. Overall, my life hasn't changed much, with one exception. I startled my wife the first time I entered the house through the back door, but I don't plan on entering to the front for a long while. Sorry about that. Honey, I really fucked up my knees the other day. Hurts to climb the patio steps. Which, technically speaking, isn't a lie, but it's not the real reason I avoid the patio. I avoid the patio because I'm afraid of what I might discover. What if I step over the floorboards and they wince like they're supposed to, but it isn't exactly right? I wouldn't be able to cope with the ambiguity. I don't think I'm still in the warehouse, but I think it's just safer not to know for sure. Story 8. I care for an old woman with dementia who thinks her dead husband is still alive. I'm starting to believe her. It was my stepfather who wanted me to get a job. Even part-time, he said, was better than rotting away in my room. I would have been perfectly happy spending my last summer before I turned 18 doing just that, but unfortunately, it wasn't an option. On this particular day, I stood by the cramped entrance to our small town's one supermarket, gazing up at the employees' wanted posters stapled to the bulletin board. Glancing over at the dead-eyed workers slouched behind the tills across from me, I decided against retail. Scanning the notices, I eventually found an offer that piqued my interest. Friends of the Elderly, a small, local charity set up by our town's nursing home. Volunteers would be assigned to a pensioner with few, if any, living friends or relatives. They'd be sent to them one day out of the week, and spend an hour or two keeping them company. The work was unpaid, sure, but it was also hardly work. Most importantly, it'd leave me functionally free for the entire summer. It wasn't what my stepfather had in mind, but I'd like to see him try and talk me out of something like this in front of my mother. I tore a slip of paper with a phone, number printed on it from a poster, and cycled home. Following a brief phone call, I visited the nursing home and talked with the kind man there who was organizing the whole system. After that initial in-person rendezvous, the rest of the correspondence was done via email. In early June, my position was finalized, and I was paired with a lovely old lady called Agatha. Agatha lived alone in a musty house near the edge of town, not too far from one of my friends. My stepdad was apprehensively proud of me for finding fulfilling work like this, and paid for my first bus fare out to her. Fishing back in my mind for what the man at the care home told me, I managed to remember exactly where she lived and hopped off the bus right outside of the driveway. Two weathered, marble horse-head statues mounted the stone pillars that led into the wall that encircled her property. Much of her land was covered in trees, and the divided wall was the only clue to where her estate ended and the surrounding forest began. I pushed open the old iron gate, which grinded like stiff cogs. Squeezing between a narrow gap, I began to stroll up the poorly paved path that led to Agatha's house. Her lawn was a jungle of weeds and discarded furniture. The walk to her pastel blue door felt endless. But finally I knocked, taking into account her poor hearing. I rang the bell too. I heard a muffled voice from inside, assumedly saying, "I'm coming." And before long, the door swung open. A decrepitly old woman greeted me, and I responded back with simple, "Hi, I'm Norman." She took my hand in hers and led me inside. Agatha's home smelled like dust and sherry. Her decor triggered long dormant memories of visiting my own late grandparents. As soon as the door closed, she was offering everything from sweet milk to shortbread, and guided me to her equally ancient sofa in the front room. Agatha's eyes held pure kindness, devoid of any malice. She looked at me like a beloved son. Midway through our first talk, it struck me that she might truly believe I was. The thought nearly brought tears, but I kept smiling. She spent half an hour asking about school and if I had a girlfriend. I chatted easily, knowing keeping her company was my job. When I finally asked about her, she seemed surprised but answered anyway. "Oh, it's been hard since my Strauss died," she said, putting a bony hand on my shoulder. "I feel so lonely sometimes. I suppose I have the lady from the hospital. She visits a few times a week, but she's nothing but a sourpuss." With that, Agatha threw back her head and cackled dryly. She only ever talks about what I should and shouldn't do. Take these pills, don't go outside. Pardon my language, dear, but she treats me like a damn child. With that, Agatha looks down and sighs. Then her paper-thin lips turn up into a smile, and she looks at me again. "I have you now, though, so none of that matters," she says and shakes my shoulder. I beam at her, feeling a warmth grow inside my heart. I suddenly realized how rewarding this job could be, even if it wasn't monetarily. And despite the bulging varicose vein on her forehead that looked like it could pop at any moment, and despite the fact that she spoke with a cadence similar to the hum of an old radiator, I could imagine myself spending a large part of my summer with her. Before I could reassure Agatha that I could come keep her company whenever she wanted, she stood with a crack and shuffled to the kitchen, hollering back that she was just going to make some tea. I smiled and sat patiently where I was, looking around the room inquisitively. It was like a mini museum, with every surface covered in more dusty knickknacks than I could count. There were porcelain figurines, old photographs, crystal bijoux, jars of marbles, an urn, stuffed animals, taxidermied animals, everything. Most intriguingly, an odd white hood in a glass box. I stood up and took one of the pictures from the mantel. A long-dead soldier looked out from the frame. I wondered if this was Strauss, her late husband who she mentioned in passing. I heard the friction between her slippers and the gray-blue carpet as Agatha steplessly walked back into the living room. She sat with her mug of English tea and a handful of cookies. I returned to the space next to her and showed her the portrait. "Who's this?" I asked her, both genuinely curious and trying to make conversation. She slid on her eyeglasses, which had until then been dangling around her neck. The lenses looked as thick as a submarine's porthole. She sucked her teeth and then, suddenly, sat back and let out a long "ah" as she recognized him. "That's Zoran," she exclaimed. "He's my Strauss older brother. That would have been him in the Second World War." I paused, a strange thought suddenly forming in my mind. Was he I began but trailed off. Agatha realized the implications of my unspoken words and frowned. "Oh heavens, no. Oh no. Zoran was part of the... She trailed off, losing her train of thought. After a few seconds in silence, she spoke again and didn't stop for some time. "My Strauss came to America when he was a boy, just after the start of that horrible war. Only he and his mother made it, and she died of consumption not long afterwards. My family took him in and taught him English. He worked and lived on our farm for the rest of his childhood and some into his adulthood. While I was wet behind the ears back them. I don't mind admitting it, but I still knew what love was. I loved Strauss, but my father wouldn't have it. To him, he was just like any other farm animal, I suppose. Even if he didn't think that exactly, he still made him sleep out in the barn like he was." I got comfortable in my seat and waited silently for what I expected to be something of a life story. We eloped in 1949. Stealing is a sin, and you should do right to remember that. But we had to take money from my father. We had no choice. We took that money and used it to make something of a new life for ourselves once we got up north. We came across this town that you live in today. Back then, it had doubled in size in just 4 years. They wouldn't notice us two slipping in. She suddenly drew in a deep, rasping breath. The reason for the growth was a new factory. It was built by the government in 1945 to manufacture all the new lotions and potions they came up with during the war. Well, it had endless jobs going for it, and my Strauss took one of them. We settled down then and tried to start a family. It was all going dandy until 1954. I expected Agatha to continue after her long pause, but she didn't. She just wordlessly stared at the white cloth mask in the glass cabinet. I leaned in and put what I hoped was a soothing hand over hers. What happened in 1954? I asked. There was a fire at the factory. She said the words like they were the closing line of a somber poem. Before long, she spoke again. Most of the young men and boys died, so I should count myself lucky that my Strauss survived. And I do, of course, but I was never sure if he did. You see, he wasn't the same after it. His spirit never changed. Oh no, but he was so badly burnt. It was a chemical fire that did it. The bigwigs try to blame the workers themselves for it. You know that? I'm so sorry, I said, using my stock reply for any tragic news. I'm surprised you don't know. What are they teaching in these schools nowadays anyway? Nobody gives a hoot about local history. She mumbled out a few more of her qualms with the U.S. education system before I subtly reminded her that she'd been telling me about her late husband. Of course, muttered Agatha, desperately trying to collect her memories. After some time of staring off into space, she proclaimed, "Ah!" and stood. She shuffled the shelf on which stood her late husband's urn. Next to it was a glass cabinet. There was a girl at school that I had a crush on, a major one. She was a film buff to the point where it became her personality, and would usually ask people what their favorite film was before she got their name. I recently found out that her favorite movie was David Lynch's The Elephant Man. As soon as I did, I found a way to watch it and brought it up with her the next time I saw her. Her name was Layla, and our first date was the following Monday. I bring this up just to say that when I looked in the glass cabinet, the mask I saw reminded me of the one worn by Joseph Merrick. It was made of plain white cloth, yellowed slightly with age, and had 2 eye holes cut in the shape of a squash circle. After he got better, he found work as a groundskeeper at the high school. He took to wearing this mask, so the kids didn't point and laugh at him. Kids can be so cruel sometimes. She recounted as she gazed at her Strauss's ashes. "Say, what high school do you go to?" she said as she turned to face me again. I told her, and she smiled as she realized that it was the same school Strauss worked at for nearly 30 years. We sat again, and she told me of how he died at only 61. It was an aggressive form of lymphoma. The sadness in Agatha's eyes as she told me was heartbreaking. It was like she'd only heard the news of her husband's passing moments before. I put a comforting hand on her shoulder as she slipped into melancholy. As I did, I gleaned the time from my watch and realized I'd been here half an hour longer than I was supposed to be. I liked that first day with her, don't get me wrong, but when I realized the time I got up to leave, so soon, Agatha asked, "I'll be back same time next week. I'll see you then." I replied, trying not to feel like a heartless monster. She escorted me to the door and took my hand in both of hers. She shook it within an inch of its life and thanked me profusely for keeping her company. Just as I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist again. "Yugoslavia," she said, seemingly at random. "Zoran, during the war he was a partisan." I realized she was talking about her brother-in-law I asked about earlier and smiled my response. I waved at her, walking down her winding driveway, a gallery of garbage among the weeds either side of me. I got the bus back just in time for dinner. How'd it go with the crone? My dad asked as he chewed on the fried leg of some dead bird. It went well, and don't call her that. She was lovely, actually. I responded, "You're still here, so I see she didn't bore you to death," he said, sucking meat juice from his fingers. She didn't know. She was telling me about her husband Strauss for most of it. Strauss, my father repeated as he looked at me for the first time in conversation. As in Scarface Strauss? Maybe, I replied. Where do you know him from? He was the groundskeeper at your high school. All the way back when I went there, he used to terrify the kids. God. Whenever he caught someone playing around in his freshly racked pile of leaves, he'd pull his mask up and glare at them. It'd always send them running back to class. The revelation that my own father was one of the cruel children Agatha mentioned didn't come as a shock. Not wanting my faith in his morals to degrade further, I didn't ask him any more questions about Strauss. Maybe another time, I thought to myself. My date with Layla went perfectly. If you were wondering, we met at the empty field near town. Just us, some smokes, and the remnants of where a county fair had been set up. She blew smoke rings in my face while I tried not to cough. And we talked like we'd known each other forever. Even when she opened up about her parents' deaths and her uncle's addiction, I didn't mind. I just listened, saying, I'm so sorry. When words failed, when she kissed my cheek goodbye, leaving a purple lipstick stain, I knew I was hers. I watched her walk off to the bus stop with the eyes of a lovesick puppy. Come Saturday, it was my turn to catch a bus. There was one in our town, one that was far from reliable. Still, before I could afford a car of my own, it was all I could peg my hopes on. I'm not the most athletic guy, especially not back then, and cycling to Agatha's seemed like an impossible task. Or at least a task that'd leave me with a stitch. The old, rickety beast wasn't too late that day, and I arrived at Agatha's front gate practically on time. I pushed it open and started to trek up the path to her house. Her large garden was a mess, and I wondered if she'd pay me on the side to clear up for her. As I neared the house, I was stopped in my tracks by a low growling behind me. I turned and saw an Alsatian baring its teeth at me. Thick, steaming saliva dripped from its black gums to the paved ground beneath. I wasn't afraid of dogs, but this one made me take a wary step back. Behind me, I heard the front door open. As it did, the dog suddenly took off into the overgrown lawn and off into forest. I turned to see Agatha waiting on the doorstep, smiling absently at me. I made my way up to me and gently shook her outstretched hand. Hey, Agatha, I said. She gripped my hand in both of hers. Her wrinkled skin felt like dry leaves. Hello, dear. You must be Edward's son. Come in, come in. She mumbled and led me inside. Before I could correct her, she continued. When was the last time you visited? Huh? Christmas '87? The house has changed so much since then. Let me give you a tour. Agatha, I began. I'm Norman. I'm here to keep you company, remember? I was here last week. She paused at the foot of her stairs. She stared intensely at nothing in particular and began to murmur no to herself over and over again in a voice so quiet I almost couldn't hear her. Slowly, she looked back at me. With vice-like eye contact, she faintly said, I'll give you the tour, then started ascending the carpeted staircase. With no reason not to, I followed her. The musty stench that wafted to the first floor was like a thick, inescapable stench on the second. Every wall was lined with dozens of picture frames, each with a faded photo of a long-dead relative. The constant glaze of dust was like the shed skin of a python. Someone needed to hire her a cleaner. My Strauss loved his antiques, she said as we brushed past oak shelves stacked with archaic trinkets. This is the guest bedroom, where you'll be staying, suggested Agatha and waves a frail hand towards a dull wooden door to our left. I opened my mouth to correct her, but bit my tongue. And this was my Strauss bedroom. She motioned now to the door directly to the right of the guest room. Oh, Lord, was he a snorer. I used to kick him out of bed so often because of it that he ended up just sleeping in there in the end. I chuckled politely while she conducted the rest of her tour, ending in her bedroom. It was the last room of the upstairs hallway, which ended in another vase with more dead vegetation. Above the pot was a circular window, which gave a porthole's view of the forest beyond the house. I looked up and saw the pull-down hatch to the attic. Agatha noticed me looking and spoke. That goes up to the attic. There's nothing but asbestos up there, so don't you think about going up? Now, let me put on some tea. With that, she began to shuffle over the sickly green carpet, across the snug corridor and down the stairs, looking back at some of the more interesting antiques. I followed her. I wasn't even halfway down the staircase when I heard it. I stopped. I listened closely. I could have sworn I heard a quiet bang. I listened out for it for some time, until finally Agatha called my name, my real name, and I hurried down into the lounge. I spent hours listening to Agatha's stories about our town's history. Though her memory faltered on important things, she knew every scandal, secret, and rumor about local families, affairs, hidden children, even a devil's pact. Time flew, and I nearly missed my bus. After thanking her, I rushed upstairs to her lime green themed bathroom. On my way down, I noticed the attic hatch wide open, swinging at a 90-degree angle. Assuming a faulty latch, I left without mentioning it. If I had, maybe she wouldn't have died the way she did. When I came into Agatha's house that third week, something felt different, off. It wasn't just because I'd cycled there and my legs were burning. The atmosphere in the house was different. I called out her name, and her carer came down the stairs. She greeted me with a deflated smile and told me that Agatha had taken a turn for the worse. She was in bed in her room, and I went up to her while her carer attempted to fix her lunch in the cramped kitchen. I made my way down the garishly carpeted floor into her room, where the door had been left open a crack. I pushed in and saw Agatha lying weakly on a bed. I sat on the edge of her bed, patted Agatha's arm, and asked her how she was feeling. Dozens of bottles of pills were stacked on her bedside cabinet, some spilling their contents. Surrounding them were a few half-full glasses of water and orange juice. Slowly, the old woman opened her eyes and looked at me. They were glassy and stared without any recognition. Still, she broke into a smile. "I feel wonderful, dear. Just wonderful," she replied in a raspy voice and grabbed my hand firmly. "My Strauss came back last night." I nearly grimaced at her delusion, but hid my reaction for her sake. "That's nice," I said. "It was so wonderful," Agatha continued. "He hasn't changed a bit. I stayed up all night talking to him, just like the old days." She shook my hand, which was clasped between hers, vigorously. She looked so happy. "He's in his bedroom down the hall. You should pop in and introduce yourself," Agatha said suddenly after a minute of uneasy silence. Before I could respond, her carer, who I never got the name of, walked into the room. She was carrying a streaming mug of something hot and sat on the other side of the bed. "Here you go, love," Agatha's carer said, setting the cup of tea down. She spoke with a British accent, which explained her affinity for tea making. "Thank you, dear," the old woman rasped and took the mug, taking tentative sips. "You should get some more rest," suggested the carer as she leaned across the bed and took a bottle of pills from my side. "Take 2 of these and try to go to sleep. Sleep is the best healer." Agatha nodded and began to fumble a capsule or 2 out of the small, amber-colored bottle. Her carer stood and motioned for me to follow her. I did, and as soon as we were in the hall, she spoke. "I think what you're doing is great," she said, "but Agatha's an ill woman. You should go home, leave her be for a while." I nodded, understanding her reasoning. It would be hard to keep Agatha company while she's passed out on what looked like it'd soon be her deathbed. The British carer patted my shoulder and walked past me and down the stairs. Soon after, I turned to follow her. As I walked down the short hall, I glanced furtively at Strauss' old room. I noticed the door was open, just a crack. That week was the best of the summer. Layla was once again unemployed, and we spent the entire week together, just before we parted on Friday evening. She asked me if I was free again on Saturday. "I'll be at Agatha's, I think, for most of the day at least." "I'm sorry," I said, forlorn. "What about in the evening? Or morning?" Layla replied. I paused and thought her question over. Eventually I said, "Want to come with me?" And she did. That Saturday, we walked up the path leading to Agatha's house together. When she answered the door, I noticed she looked pale. That unhealthy complexion glossed over when she saw Layla, however. In a strange way, it was comforting to see Agatha genuinely not recognize someone she didn't know. We came in and talked for a bit, before I decided the day was a good opportunity to work on the lawn. Agatha agreed, and Layla kept her company while I headed out. Before I did, the old woman shuffled into her kitchen, rummaged around for a while before coming back with a rusty iron key. "For the shed," she told me and entrusted it into my palm, curling my fingers around it for me. I made my way through the long grass to the back of the house. There was a smattering of gravel back there, and an used, rusting husk of a car. Moss grew over the hood, and mildew covered the seats. The shed looked equally as dilapidated, and the bolt on the lock seemed like it would disintegrate at the slightest contact. When I slid the key in, thankfully, it came open with a slow grind. I let it drop to the ground and slowly opened the rotting wooden door. I was met with the stench of death. I instantly recoiled, burying my nose in my elbow. It was a raccoon carcass that reminded me of a ketchup packet that had been stamped on. I grabbed a cobweb-covered shovel, scooped up the remains, and dumped them past an old picket fence. After a quick sign of the cross, I hauled a heavy manual lawnmower to the front yard, clearing the scattered junk, mostly bits of washing machines, car parts, and dishwashers. Felt like disturbing an archaeological site. I stacked what I could on the paved path, wondering how long it had all been rusting there. The lawnmower was a predictable nightmare. I had to stop every half a minute to untangle the blade or dump shredded grass from the painfully small basket. My only saving grace was that I arrived closer to evening, since I reckoned the midday sun would have finished me off. After an hour, I'd only cut away a small clearing of overgrowth. To make matters worse, the dog, that mangy Alsatian I bumped into a few weeks before, was back. It sat near the treeling, judging me. I know it doesn't make sense to feel like your technique is being critiqued by a mutt, but that's what I felt in that moment. Eventually, some respite came when Layla came out to me, holding a glass of orange juice. "You missed a patch," she said teasingly. I pretended and failed, to be annoyed as I took the glass of juice from her and attempted to down it in one. I failed at that too, and OJ came out my nose as I coughed and spluttered. Layla burst into laughter. Once we both steadied ourselves, I asked her how she was finding Agatha. Good, she replied. She's kind of intense, and she loves to talk. Her favorite movie is Mary Poppins, which I can respect. I smiled, glad they were bonding. I never had a grandmother. One died before I was born, the other when I was an infant. I felt Agatha starting to fill that role for me, in a sense. I made an unspoken obligation to continue my visits to her after the summer ended. Layla disappeared back inside, and I continued my moil for another hour or so. When I finished, I put the useless mower back in the shed before heading into the house, where I was greeted with a cool iced tea. I spoke with Agatha for a bit, explaining to her the world I did and what I'll do the next time I come, until Layla said it was time to go. We both got up and began our walk to the nearest bus stop, waving at the old lady as we walked down the path, which, I may add, was no longer infiltrated with weeds. Most of it, anyway. So what do you think of her? I asked again as we approached the bus stop, fishing for a more honest answer. She's sweet, Layla replied. Reminds me of my own grandma a lot. Yeah, I get that. I muttered. Strauss seems interesting, Layla said as we took our seats in the cramped, glass enclosure next to the stop sign. Did she give you the life story? I asked with a chuckle. She did, admitted Layla. There were a few gaps in it, though. Yeah. I exhaled. She's old, I guess. It's Alzheimer's. Oh, right. I thought it was something like that. Yeah, poor woman. I said, it's such a terrifying illness. It is, Layla said glumly. There was a pause. The street lamps began to flicker on as the sun went to sleep. Then she spoke again. He didn't have much to say. I looked at Layla, curious. Who didn't? I asked her. Strauss, she replied. Agatha's husband. I let out a chuckle, which comes to an abrupt end halfway through. What do you mean he didn't have much to say? I probed Layla further. I mean, she began, slightly annoyed, that he didn't have much to say when I saw him. Or, well, anything. There was a moment or two of silence. You saw him? I asked. Layla sighed. Yeah, well, I mean, not really. He came down the stairs while I was talking to Agatha. She went over to talk to him, but I didn't hear anything. I could just see his, legs. I froze as a sudden painful realization crept over me. Agatha had told me her husband came home, and now this? In that moment, I knew what was happening. A relative of Agatha's had come to stay, and in her unending confusion, she convinced herself that it was her husband. This theory terrified me, as I'd always assumed that the last ounce of clarity the old woman would keep would be over her husband, her lover, the man she was married to for almost 50 years. I felt sick, imagining the cherished memories she made with Strauss over her lifetime crumbling to dust in her mind. Did you see her Kara today? I asked Layla. Georgia? Layla replied, Oh, is that her name? I said, relieved I now knew without having to ask Georgia directly. Yeah, and no, I didn't see her, Layla said. Agatha told me she hadn't been around in days. Like, a week almost. What the hell? I barked. I sat back in the uncomfortable bench inside of the bus shelter, complete with the latest in anti-homeless technology. The sloped metal bar digging into my haunches worsened my mood. They can't just leave her on her own like that. I continued, she needs constant care. Just a week ago, she was bedridden. Layla watched me as I grew furious and stood up. I'm going to go back to her house. See how she is and who's with her. Make sure she's okay. I proclaimed. Layla arose from her section-off part of the bench and stood by me. I'll come with you, she said. It's fine, Layla. You can get the bus home. The next one is the last one anyway. I replied back. I'm coming, okay? Besides, it's not like I have a curfew, she rebutted, and that was that. We both began to walk back to Agatha's house. In the late evening of the summer months, the world turns blue. It was this blue world that Layla and I crept through to return to the old lady's house. The walk back went quicker than we thought, and we were soon met with a familiar iron gate. I pushed it open with a long, drawn-out creak and began to trek up the walkway to the old and venerable abode. I felt an uneasy cloud waft around us as we drew closer to her home. It reached a boiling point as we both sensed something bounding towards us from amongst the remaining tall grass. It was a German shepherd. Moments before Layla and I both suffered from a shared heart attack, the dog revealed itself and trotted between us, begging for scratches and belly rubs. I let out a tentative exhale and patted the mutt just behind the ears as it unfurled its tongue. Layla mentioned something about the mortality rate of rabies, and I quickly recoiled my hand. The dog followed us the rest of the way to Agatha's front door, staying a short distance behind us. I knocked on the door, and as I assumed, received no answer. It was getting dark now, and Agatha wouldn't have been up this late on the best of days. I picked up a chipped gnome by the front step and fished out the front door key from under it. It slid into the lock, and I let myself inside. It was weird entering her home at night. The place had a perfect stillness about it, like it had been left uninhabited for decades. Layla followed behind me, and the old dog stayed put on the front step, not putting a paw further. Layla was about to ascend the staircase when I veered off through the doorway on the right and made my way into the living room. The glass case which once held the heirloom of Strauss's hood mask was now empty. What's wrong? Layla said as she crept up behind me, making me jump out my skin. The cabinet, it's empty, I replied. Is it not supposed to be? Layla said, puzzled. I'm pretty sure it was earlier. Confused, Layla and I left the front room and climbed the stairs to the second floor. I led her down the corridor to Agatha's room, where I knocked gently on the door. After some time, there was no reply. It felt wrong, but I knew I would have to check inside. I gently opened the door and entered. My plan was to slowly shake the old woman awake, but that was foiled when Layla switched on the light while I was barely halfway across the room. Agatha awoke, startled. I glared back at my girlfriend, who mouthed, I'm sorry. Wow, what was going on? Agatha stammered as she sat up in bed. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights. Agatha, Agatha, it's me, Norman. It's fine, I just want to see if you're okay. I assured her. Gradually she calmed as she recognized me. Oh, Norman. She paused and looked past me at the doorframe. And who are you, my dear? My name is Layla. Layla confirmed and stood next to me. Such a lovely name, Agatha said absently. Why the late visit? We just wanted to see if you were okay, since your carer has abandoned you, I told the old woman earnestly. I don't need Georgia anymore. My Strauss is back, she rasped. Layla and I exchanged a glance. Which room is he in? I asked, though I already suspected. First on the right, she said. I left the musty room and walked down the short, equally musty hallway to Strauss's supposed bedroom. I knocked on the door and received no reply. I took the door handle in my palm and slowly opened it. As it cracked open, a torrent of flies escaped from within. Startled, I pushed the door open fully. Sat on the bed with his back to me as a figure. He wore a dark coat, as far as I could make out, and had a bone white scalp. I quickly realized he was Strauss's hood mask. Suddenly, the funk within the room hit me, and my sense of smell revolted against my body. I bent double at the grotesque stench that I can only describe as hot feces and roadkill. I took a step back into the hallway, but not before I noticed the stacks of pots and cups filled with a thick, red, corporeal liquid. As the figure stood, I ran to Agatha's room. We need to leave, I commanded, taking hold of Layla's forearm. Agatha, come with me. Agatha swung her frail legs out of bed, but didn't move much more. Whatever for? She asked and smiled. Allow me to justify myself for a second. I loved Agatha like she was my own grandmother, but she'd be living with whoever that was for days, maybe even weeks at that point, and no harm had come to her. This logic was sound in the moment, and I acted on it. I guided Layla out of the room and into the corridor, leaving Agatha where she was. The figure stood in the middle of the hall, dark and imposing. The hood mask, unworn for decades, was now pulled tight over his head. The two eye holes had only blackness behind them. His long, black coat fell down to his feet, which were hovering a few inches off the ground. At once he lunged, like an animalistic predator. His pale, bony hands forged a path to Layla's neck, and he slammed her against the wall. I was looking in her eyes as the light went out in them. Manic, I ran into Agatha's room and slammed the door shut behind me. It was quickly thrown open again by the figure, who calmly floated inside. I collapsed backwards, steadying myself only when I fell against an old bookshelf. Agatha got to her feet and stood in front of the figure. She put her hands tenderly on either side of its head. "Oh, Strauss, my love," she whispered. She curled her fingers under the rim of the hood mask and carefully, as she'd done hundreds of times before with her husband, raised it from its face. Suddenly, Agatha soured. You're not my Strauss," she said in a moment of perfect clarity. The figure in turn put its hands on either side of Agatha's face. Before she could squirm away, it dived down, sinking two haggard canine teeth into her neck. It lapped up what blood it could feverishly, before letting the old woman crumple to the floor, still holding her husband's mask. Then it locked its attention on me. I glanced to my side, realizing my only hope of survival was a large window. I clambered to it and pushed it open as far as it could go as I heard movement behind me. I felt vomit rise in my throat and jumped. My ankle shattered. I felt the bone turn into a jigsaw puzzle. As soon as I hit the cement, I gasped through the pain and tried to walk. After every few steps, I collapsed back down on my hands and knees. I kept the routine going as I made my way to the front of the house. I didn't look back, even when I heard the gentle landing of the figure as it floated down from Agatha's room. I aimed for the grass, trying to give me torn knees and palms respite from the gravel. As soon as I reached the green edge, I collapsed onto my back. The figure was standing in front of me. It was now that I finally got a good look at the thing's face. Its skin was as white as a hood mask, interrupted only by the blackness of its eyes and the redness that caked its gullet and neck. Its sockets were empty, filled only with a dark bile. I could have sworn I saw a torn nerve dangling from the gape. Its nose looked like it had been ravaged by some wasting disease, like leprosy or syphilis. Maybe both. The same was true for its non-existent ears and lips. Its teeth looked like scattered bits of broken glass, loosely attached to wilting gums. All but its top canines, which were in mint condition. That thing that had been masquerading as Strauss already had more than its feet of blood for Night, but with the way it approached me, I could tell it wanted more. The German shepherd bared its teeth and snarled. The figure, which had been floating just off the ground on stump-like feet, rotated to look, if it even could, at the source of the growling. As it did, the large dog pounced. Its weight slamming into the figure knocked both to the ground. I started to crawl to the large patch of long grass I had left uncut. A rusty mattress spring jutting from the earth snagged my pocket, spilling out lint and an empty packet of apple-flavored gum. Just before I dragged myself into that haven, I looked back. I was just in time to see the mutt clamp its fangs around the bottom jaw off the figure, ripping and tearing it from its head. I tumbled onto the grass, landing painfully on an old, discarded garden hoe. Taking my phone from my pocket, I rang the police and managed to stutter out what was happening. I gave them the address I'd memorized weeks before and hung up. Every word I spoke aloud felt like yelling out my exact location. I tore the old garden tool from the soil and used it as a makeshift crutch as I limped down the path. I was moving painfully slow, with each step feeling like an electric shock zapping through my legs and up my spine. I could hear the distant battle behind me, the yelping of the dog interspersed with the otherworldly calls of that thing. After what felt like days, I reached the street. I staggered down rows of high brick walls and foliage. My only thought was going forward, away from that killer. I still hadn't gone as far as the bus stop when I heard the noise. It was a rapid pitter-patter, and I turned to see the figure sprinting down the road with the speed of an Olympic athlete and the intent of a starving big cat. Its stump feet left trails of gunk behind on the road, meat scrapped away by the rough asphalt. I barely had time to react before it leapt on me, but I did. I jabbed the hoe at it, feeling like a lion tamer. The dull metal tip collided with its chest, and I felt the rider would snap as it did. It lunged, its top teeth sharp and ready to rip, its bottom teeth still somewhere in Agatha's garden, and then it was flung back. Its reaction to having the stake-like wooden handle plunge into the approximate location of its heart was immediate and extreme. It was down for all of 5 seconds before it stood again. I wept and clutched the other half of the hoe to my chest, the sharp, splintered edge pointing outward. The figure staggered uneasily towards me, the accidental stake still protruding from its chest. Suddenly, a spurt of black gunk erupted from its mushy skull. I took a step to the side and turned to its new assailant. The crowd of police officers opened fire as it tried to charge toward them. I put my fingers in my ears and collapsed to the ground as they fired round after round, finally putting an end to any twitch or jerk in the decrepit body. A woman in uniform took me from my hiding spot and led me away from the scene. The rest of that night was a blur. In fact, the rest of that year was a blur. The only other bit that I remember from that night was being sat down in the cop car by the lady who found me and having the weirdest conversation of mine. She told me that in October the year prior that there had been an apparent murder-suicide. On Halloween night, 2 boys were brutally killed by their Sunday school teacher, who then took his own life. I knew the story well as Gary, the supposed killer, had taught me. The cop told me that this was a baseless rumor, and that she'd been a first responder that night. What she saw in that house was no mentally ill zealot. It was a monster. It was a figure. It was what had escaped her that night, and immediately after went on to pose as the dead husband of an elderly woman for longer than I could have imagined. Story 9. The Hollow-Eyed Woman. I never considered myself superstitious. I grew up in a pragmatic household where ghosts were mere figments of imagination fueled by horror movies and tales spun by anxious parents. But as I sit here, trembling while recounting my experience, I can no longer dismiss what happened that night. It started innocuously enough. A weekend trip to my uncle's old house in the woods for a little family reunion. The house had been in our family for generations, standing lonely at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by looming pines and the occasional eye of a curious deer. My uncle, a retired history professor, had filled his home with relics and artifacts collected over decades, each with a story that made the air thick with nostalgia. On Saturday night, after the adults had enjoyed their share of wine and stories, the atmosphere shifted. Shadows stretched as if eager to engulf the corners of the room. The group began regaling each other with urban legends and local folklore, tales that seeped fear into the unwary hearts of listeners. That's when my cousin Allison, a few years younger than I, leaned in close and whispered about the hollow-eyed woman, a spirit said to haunt the woods surrounding the house. "People say she appears if you wander too far," she murmured. "They say she tries to lure you away, promising you secrets. But if you listen to her, you're never seen again." Of course, being the eldest and in my mind the most rational, I scoffed and dismissed her tales, but Allison's eyes sparkled with fervor that was unsettling. I merely smiled, ruffled her hair, and told her she was being dramatic. The adults moved on, oblivious to the rare chill that had started to settle over me. After the night wound down and everyone retired, I felt restless. Sleep eluded me, and the atmosphere of the quiet, old house took on a weight that pressed against my chest. I crept to the bathroom, the only source of light coming from a half-broken bulb in the hallway. As I returned to my room, I heard a strange noise outside, a soft, beckoning voice drifting to the open window like a distant echo. Curiosity gnawing at me, I decided to investigate. With every step toward the back door, the floorboards creaked beneath me like the moans of the house itself. Growing impatient at this breach of silence, I stepped out onto the back porch, clutching my thick sweater around me as the cool night air bit my skin. I squinted into the darkness, trying to pierce the veil of shadows, and that's when I heard it again, a whisper, soft and almost melodic. It drifted from the tree line, weaving through the branches the unmistakable call of a woman's voice. "Come here." I hesitated, aware of the warnings refracting back into my mind, but the allure was strong. It felt wrong to indulge in my curiosity, yet I stepped off the porch and into the garden. The moonlight filtered through the canopy of trees, illuminating an uneven path curling deeper into the woods. That voice, how it coiled around my thoughts. It felt like an invitation, perhaps a puzzle waiting to be solved. The deeper I walked, the more the trees closed in around me, the air enveloping me in stillness that was heavier than before. I called out, trying to make sense of silence, but all that echoed back was the creaking of branches and the rustle of leaves. Just as panic began to wiggle into my chest, I caught sight of something in the distance, a pale shape among the dark trunks, a drifting figure. My heart raced. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe this was just a childish ghost story taking root in my mind. But there she stood, a woman dressed in a flowing white gown, long hair cascading over her shoulders. Just beyond her hideous, hollow-cheeked face were two deep, sunken eyes that seemed to swallow all light. "Come closer." The voice was no longer warm. It was a low, rasping sigh, like dead leaves stirring. I did not move. Every instinct screamed to retreat. Yet there was something in her gaze, a hollow promise, that I was desperate to understand. "I know what you seek. I can show you everything," she beckoned, extending a skeletal hand toward me. In that moment, the fear that had gripped my insides twisted into something worse, a crushing sorrow. I felt as though she were unearthing every remorseful thought I had ever buried, every secret I wished remained undiscovered. Every shameful moment surfaced as I was drawn closer against my will. The chill of the night wrapped tightly around me, each breath pulling me further into her abyss. "Please, just a glimpse." I found myself pleading, but whether it was for her favor or my own solace, I could not tell anymore. I took a cautious step forward, a branch snapping beneath my foot, and she turned sharply, her hollow eyes locking onto mine with a feral intensity. "Follow," she whispered, and again I was compelled, stumbling after her. I moved deeper into the woods, the underbrush clawing at my legs, the sounds of night fading as I ventured further into the darkness. But then, in an instant, she turned toward me, her expression shifting into something I dared not comprehend. Now you're mine," she hissed, her beauty twisting into malevolence as her figure morphed, becoming a glimmering shadow of despair. That's when I realized I had lost my bearings. I had no idea which direction led back to the house. I was trapped in a caged forest, and the laughter of the woman turned to howls as the trees closed in around me. A fleeting terror surged within me, and I fought against compulsion. I turned to run, heart pounding. I darted through the trees, branches scraping at my skin, but when I turned back, she was still there, the glistening darkness at my heels, her whispers morphing into screams. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes bled into hours, my thoughts hacked apart by panic. Finally, I broke free from the woods and collapsed on the familiar ground of the backyard, gasping for breath. The moon hung hauntingly still above, as if it had known my struggle. I stood trembling at the foot of the porch stairs, terrified to look back. I rushed inside, slamming the door shut, my heart hammering to drown out the echoes that lingered in the night. The following morning, dawn's light revealed the chaos I had weathered. I recounted my experience to my family, but they laughed it off, attributing it to a youthful imagination running wild. I feigned a smile, heart still pounding and voice trembling, but inside, I was unmoored. After the family reunion, I left, but every night since, that whisper stalks my dreams, creeping through the walls, echoing in the hushed breathing of twilight. I can still feel their watchful gaze, the dread that lingers like a shroud, swelling within me as I lie awake. Each shadow in my room stretches and distorts into something familiar, the reminder of the woman in the woods, with those hollow eyes that promised everything but betrayed me. Now, as the sun sets and shadows crawl back into the corners of my life, I wonder if I ever truly escaped. If perhaps, somewhere in the suffocating depths of the forest, a hollow-eyed woman waits for me, still ready to collect what I owe her for the secrets I was never meant to find. Story 10. My husband is going to replace me. Our 15th wedding anniversary is next week, Jack and I's, and I think he will be celebrating with someone else. No, not someone, something. We met in our senior year of college and married just a year later. It was the perfect love story. Another year after that, we bought our first house, and 9 months later came our oldest daughter. A couple years later, the twins came. The past 10 years is in the 5 of us living what I thought was an idyllic, picture-perfect life. I stayed home with the children, putting my all into raising them. I gave everything. I'm still giving everything for this family. My babies, they're not to blame. My angels, they have no idea who their father really is. I didn't even know until yesterday. And now I need help urgently while I still have a chance. Anyways, yesterday, Jack forgot his laptop on the table when he left for work. It was open, and it dinged with notification. I don't know why I looked. I'd never gone through his things before, but some little voice in my head told me I needed to this time. It was an email notification from a DW Corp with a payment confirmation subject line. We shared a bank account, and I would have seen any recent transactions, but this did not sound familiar. I sat down and opened it. It only said, "Payment of $30,000 received. Your order has been shipped." I had a million questions, namely where could he have gotten that much money? The most upsetting thing, however, was that he had kept this from me. Whatever it was, he hid it. We never lied to each other. We were open and trusting. I wanted to vomit. I didn't let myself, though. I stayed in that chair going through every email, every file, every text. I scoured that computer until there was nothing left untouched. What I found disturbed me, frightened me. Basically, the 30 grand is just a down payment. For what? For a robot, a lifelike AI, your perfect fantasy spouse. Not only that, I was able to log into his account on the company's website, and there was a picture of me. I realized it wasn't me though, it just looked like me. He had designed this thing to look exactly like me. But why? Why make it exactly like me when he already had me? I knocked it onto the floor, and it cracked. The screen went black. I apologized profusely when he got home, but didn't mention what I'd seen. He seemed annoyed and didn't speak to me the rest of the night, or the next morning. Today, he left early this morning. I have no idea where he's gone. An hour ago, a delivery van pulled into our driveway, though, and asked for Jack. They had a package for him. I offered to sign, but no. No, it had to be delivered to the person named on their sheet. they would come back later. Maybe I'm being too paranoid. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's an elaborate prank. Maybe he's going to murder me and replace me with the perfect version of myself. I don't know what to do but sit here and wait like usual for Jack to return home. I hope this is all settled before my babies are home from school, just in case. And I hope I'm here to greet them when they do get home. If it's not me, I hope they will be able to tell.